Right. We are streaming live, I think. Welcome, one and all. I am Nicholas Lamar Suter. Often I am actually we are streaming usually
live,
I am sort of the welcome the one and all the philosopher that is being Nicholas asked Lamar and Suter, interrogated and in the hot seat. Actually Steve was not able to make it tonight. Usually I am quite graciously said that I could host sort of the welcome one and all philosopher that is being asked and interrogated and in the hot seat. Steve was not able to make it tonight. Nonetheless, I really appreciate his doing that, and I've also learned one and all philosopher that is being asked and of course, Steve not able to make it this time. Nonetheless, I really appreciate his doing that, and I've also learned one and all philosopher that is being asked. How long am I? Steve, we were going to keep this. We were going to keep this. Nonetheless, I really appreciate his doing that, and I've also learned one and all philosopher that is being asked. I really had to how long am everybody else? Steve, we were going to keep this. We were going to keep this. Nonetheless, I really appreciate his doing that, and I've also learned one and all philosopher that is being asked. I really had to how long am everybody else? Steve, we were going to keep this. We were going to keep this. Nonetheless, I really appreciate his doing that, and I've also learned one and all philosopher that is being asked. I really had to how long am everybody else? Steve, we were going to keep this. We were going to keep this. Nonetheless, I really appreciate his doing that, and I've also learned one and all philosopher that is being asked. I really had to how long am everybody else? Steve, we were going to keep this. We were going to keep this. Nonetheless, I really appreciate his doing that, and I've also learned one and all philosopher that is being asked. I really had to how long am everybody else? Steve, we were going to keep this. We were going to keep this. Nonetheless, I really appreciate his doing that, and I've also learned one and all philosopher that is being asked. I really had to how long am everybody else? Steve, we were going to keep this. We were going to keep this. Nonetheless, I really appreciate his doing that, and I've also learned one and all philosopher that is being asked. I really had to how long am everybody else? Steve, we were going to keep this. We were going to keep this. Nonetheless, I really appreciate his doing that, and I've also learned one and all philosopher that is being asked. I really had to how long am everybody else? Steve, we were going to keep this. We were going to keep this. All right. No, it's not you. It's not you. It's me. I know what happened. So a technical thing, and it should be completely fixed by now. Steve can tell me I can't listen to it, but my guess is it's completely fixed. Yeah, you'd never be able to tell I'm a total noob at this. That's not obvious in the slightest. Hopefully they can at least hear me out there, which is it's a distinct possibility. I'm still new to OBS, so um, you know. Well, the other thing is, well, okay, it was running I think it was running another channel through into the audio there. So yeah, so the OBS had on not just my mic as the channel, but just to check to see if we were up on the stream, I had that up, and even though the sound is off, it was still running through OBS. So yeah, that's done. And since I haven't heard from Steve, I'm assuming that it's been taken care of. Yeah, that's, yeah, well, and I could really use it. Oh, much better, much better. I like that. Any anything that helps put this beautiful mug up. Oh God. I'm the tech, so I'm the techie in the house. So whenever something goes wrong, she goes, call tech support, yada yada yada. And I did a smart home on the whole house, just because. Well, that's a long story why I ended up doing that. But I sat down and wired the whole house, so I can turn the lights on and off by voice and all that other stuff. And the garage, you can even do the garage door by voice if you want to. Yeah, just because I was bored. So whenever anything goes wrong, she's like, call tech support, and then it's sort of like, okay, I kind of have to know these things, or else it's humiliating. So this is good. This is doesn't deal with the people. Oh, well, you know what? My wife is exactly the same thing, and it's funny because people start to get, I'm talking with them, and they start to get really frustrated with the conversation, And like, you know what, I'd like to speak with your wife. You know, maybe she's gonna be more reasonable. I go, that's a really big mistake. Don't trust me on that. And then I put them on, and she's like, oh, they want to talk to me? And she's like, okay, how do you want me to play this? And I said, do you go? You be you, babe. She, oh, um, my desktop audio. Oh, him or me? Well, it would have to be me because I can hear him. But with the desk, okay. Well, you know what? Yep, yep. I see multiple. I actually have 3 or 4 meters. The desktop. All right, I'll put on the desktop. Well, the desktop audio is on and full, and it's not registering any levels. No, it doesn't change at all. Only changes when I talk. Clev. Yep. You know what? Move it. Oh, you know what? There we go. That's exactly right. Um, I'll bet you that may do it. So let's try that setting. That hasn't done it. Um, this is actually. Let's see if that works. Could someone say something, and we'll just see what. Um, okay, I can't hear anybody anymore, of course, and that still hasn't fixed the problem. Um, okay, so here's an idea. All right, let's do that. Unless I've got one more quick idea here. For the device, I'm going to switch to that. But yeah, it's probably a good idea to just switch to Zoom. That's the mic. Oh, okay, here we go. I got it now. This is an idea, and if this doesn't work right off the bat, we will switch. But my guess is there it is. I okay. So
Audio.
yep. I got it. I got the other levels
Awesome.
are coming in.
All right.
All right.
Progress. There you
All
go.
right.
All right.
So they can hear us now, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, I kind of wanted kind of like no, it's nothing personal. You guys are saying great stuff. I'm enjoying this conversation, and frankly, if nobody can hear you, then there's nobody to laugh at my jokes. So but I kind of like the overlord thing.
The last thing I'll leave you with before I leave is the first question that I asked Nick when he gave me the title of this.
Oh,
Is
here
it
we go.
aggressive left destroying itself? Because everybody, like myself, was wondering why I didn't say regressive left. I mean, we obviously understand the distinction. So if you would like to explain that before you continue with the show, by all means.
Oh
And
God, here we go.
And then I'm going to go watch Lucifer.
This is what Lucifer, a personal friend of yours, is he? This is why I like to at least prepare a little bit before starting, but I wanted to do this show today, and I was really psyched to do it. So I use progressive left because I think we associate a lot of the values that we're going to be talking about with the progressive left, and I don't think they're necessarily considered the regressive left values. And I think there's some behavior that we're going to be talking about that strikes me sort of the regressive left, but I don't think that the values or the groups that I'm talking about, so when we're talking about pro-trans groups and sort of other, I don't want to get too specific just yet because I think we're going to get into it. But and one of the things is, this concerns me. So people talk about social justice warriors, and it's amazing because the term is really considered a pejorative. But I've met a lot of people who sort of really like the title, who own the title, and I think that's great because I'm actually a big fan of New Atheist. And a lot of people consider that a pejorative. And I was like, I self-identify as a new atheist. And people are like, aren't you aware that that's a pejorative? I really don't care what other people think. But there are a lot of people who on Twitter especially have been putting social SJW into like their titles, and they're self-identifying as that. And so it's a little bizarre for me because I was like, okay, can you call someone an SJW, or are they going to be offended? Is it now? And I actually looked it up right before doing the show, and it's still listed as a pejorative. So it's a little. So I'm going to try to avoid the term, even though there are plenty of people who self-identify and are proud of it. But I think I'm a fan of a lot of SJW agenda. But even SJW, social justice warrior, that's already a hostile moniker. It's like I'm a warrior for, and I think there's a lot of hostility coming from that side, and I would call that side the progressive side. And I think what they're doing is I think they're alienating a lot of their, if not their base, and in some cases their base, certainly their allies who are very interested in engaging on their side and of fighting people who oppose these values, but then they get kind of attacked and really shit on by people who are so, I don't know what the word
Dogmatic?
is dogmatic. I think that's a good. It's not just about the dogma though. I think they get so passionate about it that the slightest thing that's whiffs of might be off. Kill, kill, we have to go after you. And the problem is, in some cases, it may be because something, and actually it was Red's rhetoric had just bumped into this problem. I'm sorry, I said Red's rhetoric, I meant Rationality Rules. Just bumped into this problem where I truly don't think he's a transphobe. I don't think he's a transphobe. I don't think if there's evidence to support it, I haven't seen it. He seems like a really great guy. I don't know him really well, and he said some things that really probably, some of them were misinformed. Some of them he just hadn't, really taken it as seriously as maybe he should. And he identified that. And he said, "Whoa, I screwed up. I'm sorry. Let me. I apologize." He didn't even say, "I'm sorry your feelings were hurt." He didn't do one of those, wiggle out apologies. He did a full-throated apology and said, "I will fix this." And what's happened now is the ACA has denounced him. And it's led to a whole bunch of problems. I think Steve made a few very good points last time, and I'd like to reiterate them, which is the ACA is a marvelous organization, and I think everybody here owes a lot to that organization. But that's kind of also what makes this a little concerning, which is, guys, we know about rationality. We know about, that there's nuance, and we know that people make mistakes. You have to be allowed to make mistakes. Yeah, I'm sorry, what were you going to say?
Oh no, I think a lot of it, these groups are supposed to be so welcoming and non-judgmental, but the minute you stick a toe out of line of what they believe, all of a sudden that all goes to the wayside, and that judgmentalness, they just all gang pile and jump on someone and tear them apart.
I think that's a really good point, and I think it could be even on, if you say, listen, I'm curious as to why it needs to be done ABC way, and then we're going to get into some concrete examples, but I'm curious of why it needs to be done ABC way. And if you ask a question out of even just genuine ignorance, but you admit your ignorance and you say, I do not understand, I would like to know, boom, you hate women, you're a transphobe, you whatever the topic is that you're on. And that's scary. And it's scary for a number of reasons, but the most of them are reasonably obvious. But the one that just overarching that bugs me the most is it's scary because you're going to destroy your own cause if you're that way, because people are going to start to sit there and say, everyone associated with this group are jerks. And when I ask a honest, I'm not allowed to be ignorant. I'm not allowed to, everybody has a learning curve. Everybody is ignorant on topics. Yeah.
Isn't it the opportunity if somebody says, "Hey, I made a mistake. I'm sorry. I don't know about this kind of thing." Isn't that the opportunity to then actually educate somebody opposed to try to destroy them?
That would be my view. that would be my view. Yeah.
Not long ago, one of my friends, Don, somebody else came out on Twitter as like non-binary or something like that, and he had some questions, and his question was, if in your worldview gender is a spectrum and there is no man, there is no woman, it's all just this spectrum of gender, then isn't everyone non-binary in that worldview? I don't understand the what it is that you believe. And he got crucified. I mean, absolutely crucified. And it was really disturbing for me to watch. It was like, why can't the guy have questions and admit he's ignorant about something, and you could just take this as an opportunity to educate?
Well, and two, that here takes a person who at first was very open And when he started getting jumped on, of course his hackles went up. And of course he got combative and aggressive in return.
Yes.
So there's no ability at that point to have an open dialogue.
Right.
I think that's right. And I'm going to confess something that I don't even like to admit. And this is actually a little bit of a hard confession for me. But you know, I notice I get older, I get less tolerant. And I don't think I'm an intolerant person, but you know, you start to be in pain a lot of time. You start to, you know, you don't sleep as well. Things start not working as well. You get a little grumpy and you get a little less tolerant. It just happens. I wish it didn't, but it did. So
quit talking about me that way.
She knew. You're right. She is psychic. But so, you know, one of the things is, you know, when we first met, one of the things was you had gotten into a scrape that where I thought you were being treated really rather unfairly, and you had repeated something that out of context really sounded rather terrible, but in context was accurate, and more than just being accurate. In context, it was actually relevant to the discussion, and not only was it relevant, there was an article that had talked about, in particular, one of them was the pink tax. And what the article had said was there's a lot of reasons that certain female products cost more. It said there are a lot of reasons. And you had pointed out something, which was that one of the reasons is women will pay more. And that sounds terrible until you realize that in a Keynesian economic model, that is absolutely correct. And you have to realize that nobody sets a price. Companies don't set prices. They don't. They can't. It's impossible in this economic model. What the price is set by the market. So it is supply and demand, period. And what happens is if the demand for a certain product goes up, the prices will go up because they can, as long as if the demand goes up, if the supply stays the same. And so what they've realized is we can figure out we can charge women more because they'll actually pay more for these products. Now, there were a whole bunch of really great discussions to have, and where you were going with that is that what we need to do is, as a society, own that we are forcing women to feel like they have to. They do it because they have to. That's where you were going with that. But we couldn't have that conversation because the second you said, because they're willing to pay more, you had a whole bunch of people jump on you, and you were getting shit canned, and there were some of them were bringing in reinforcements, and other people were coming in who wouldn't let you talk. The second you said something, it was confirming what they were thinking, which is that you were a bigot, you were sexist, you were all these terrible things.
An abuser. Someone accused me of abusing Growly Bite here.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And I'm sitting there, it's rare, and I very rarely lose my temper. I lost my temper on that one. The first time you ever met me, I lost my shit.
Yeah.
I was pissed because bullies are something I really have a very hard time abiding, and you were being bullied. And the other thing that I pointed out was that your statement that women are willing to pay more, and that's one of the central reasons you need to understand, which was an insightful statement as a guy who teaches economics and who wrote a book on economics. I'm telling you, I had to bring in someone with a degree in economics to confirm that, and they still were like, But all that aside, just for shits and giggles, I went and read the original article that was being posted and quoted here. That article said that one of the central reasons that needs to be addressed as to why there is this pink tax is because women are willing to pay more. You stole your line inadvertently directly out of the article. But when the article says it, the article gets, oh, wow, everybody needs to read this. And I'm sitting there going, wait a minute. You said something that's in the article. It's a point that the article makes, which is one of the things that I ended up sort of trying to point out later. And I feel bad because I'm actually really, I lost some friendships over that one.
I'm sorry.
I really did. That's all right. And I'm sorry too, because I don't think that I really would rather not have. And one of the reasons I lost the friendship too was because I really was so serious in my reply, but it was bullying, and it was bullying, and I will not abide it. And I had never met you. I didn't even know. I had no idea who you were. And it was one of my friends that was involved. And I had another good friend, someone I really like a lot, who was involved. And I think it's sort of everybody's moved past it. So I really, I was thinking I wasn't going to bring it up, and here I am talking about it. But I think it's a really good point, because what you had said was true technically, and that is a great excuse for saying really mean things. I mean, I'm just saying it like it is. I mean, so true technically is not, it is a necessary condition, but it's not a sufficient one for anything you say.
Right.
But it has to be understood. What you said was true technically. Second of all, it was appropriate in the conversation, and it was leading to something that's very important, which is why let's understand why there is this pressure that they feel they have to. And this was pointed out was, well, women pay more because they feel they have to. Yes, exactly. Let's address that.
But yeah, that's the problem. They didn't allow for the dialogue and the continue of the conversation.
Yeah.
And the thing is, you can't make that progress. You can't even address that point until everyone can agree that that is one of the leading factors in that in the pink tax is human behavior. Yeah. And what is causing that behavior? I can't think that it's purely just women want to look better than men. There has to be a major social element that drives women to think that it's necessary to be beautiful at all times. You know what I mean?
And a standard that, listen, I haven't even shaved, which admittedly, again, we're doing this kind of at the last minute, but I can get away with this. I can get away with it. In fact, there are people who are going to say, oh, wow, he's got that handsome, sexy, rugged look. Not a lot of people are going to say that, but a few might. I can dream.
Very few people are going to go, ew, he's unshaven.
Nobody has ever said that.
Oh, I thought he was gone. Oh, no, he's still listening.
Entertaining.
Well, that's good. He's entertained. That's good. Maybe he'll subscribe to my channel. At any rate, not that I've got most of the content on my channel is stolen from his, but at any rate, where were we? So that, you were talking about. Now these are insightful comments that I think could have benefited the discussion, and you didn't get to make them. And what's more, the author of the study that was being quoted, and everyone said, read this study. I was like, if you read this study, he lifted his line from the study. The study says the exact same fucking thing. And then there was no going anywhere. There was too much anger and rage in there. And then you had said shortly after this, and this gets back to what I was going to say earlier, which is I'm embarrassed to admit this. One of the things you had said was this is so brutal. Honestly, it makes me just want to oppose the cause just because of what's happening and what I'm going through. And you said that, and I was like, dude, look, I understand. That was brutal. That was one of the more brutal. I've been on Twitter for 3 years. That was one of the more brutal interactions I'd seen on Twitter. And I was like, okay, I get that, but really, we all know why it's the right thing to do, and you're gonna have these problems.
I came in and defended my husband in that argument a little bit. I got jumped all over, and this happens on more than I thought would ever happen, where he is accused of being me because I don't agree with them, and therefore I must not be a real woman.
Oh yeah, that was I couldn't believe that, and they just started attacking you before nobody had met you, nobody knew who you, and it was just like, holy shit. And then talk about going ad hominem. I mean, it's just like, none of this is necessary for being right. And if you had been wrong, yes, please.
And that's to me, I refuse to give in to that frustration and that feeling, of course.
Yeah.
But what it was is I was able to look into myself and see something and go like, well, this is how people who are well-meaning get turned, get turned toward point, not just MGTOW, but toward really toxic points of view. I mean, people become bitter. We're not the truly free agents we want to think that we are.
Yeah.
We're going to be embittered if every time we engage with a certain side, we feel like we get bit, we feel like we get burned. It's going to turn people against. I think a big thing with the Trump election was a lot of people who just wanted to burn the system down.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think you're absolutely right. And in fact, actually, and people have said that, which is it's sort of a response to sort of the success of the left in the previous 8 years, and the snarkiness and the hey, you guys are irrelevant now. We've made the right and regressives completely irrelevant, and you know, fuck you if you don't like it. And then they said, and that's one of the things I've said about Trump, which I think most people don't realize. He was actually elected for one reason, and that's he really pisses off the left. That's why. He got elected. They know he's an idiot. They really fucking do. They're not as stupid as you think they are. They know he's an idiot, but they also know that he enrages the left more than any other candidate.
He's a vengeance president.
Yep.
Yeah. He's the fuck you president. You know, like
treat us like shit. We'll show you.
Right.
I think you're absolutely right, and that's not too. I've actually had people sit there and say, you know, Nick, you realize it's your fault he's president. I was like, excuse me? And they're like, well, no, it's because your side, the left, was so mean to us. That's why we did it. Okay, I'll grant that you have a gripe. I won't grant that there's a causal that, you know, you can sit there and blame me. But okay, I get where you're going, and that's not. And if you listen to my Trump rant, which I know you did, you listened to my Trump.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Which is on my the Trump rant. I'm really proud of that. That got 5,000 views in a week, which for a guy who has 2 people on his channel.
Awesome.
Yeah. So I mean, now it's back from the primaries, and right after I did that rant, right after he said, we should kill the families of terrorists. So, but in it, I said
he's a great one for that.
Oh God. In it, I still have a hard time. We had a vote on my blog as to what his name should be, and I had a lot of good options, and we ended up with, and it's important because you need to show the respect. He is the commander in chief, so we had pussy grabber in chief. It's the in chief.
Everybody says, you know, commander in chief or president. He hears imperial emperor.
Yes, he does. He really does.
I like that you repeated imperial emperor because that is very Trumpian.
It is.
Yes, yeah. He has all the best words.
Right.
He does. He knows all the words, the best words. The people think he don't know the words.
He keeps them locked up so nobody can
see them. So in the rant, I said 2 things, which is one, I don't hate you. And I repeated that. I admitted I don't like him very much, but I don't hate you. And one reason is because hate is toxic. There's a Buddhist phrase which I really like, which is hate is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. That's fucking true. So I try really not to hate anybody because it costs too much. And Martin Luther King Jr. I got two
You're
photos
better than me.
Well, I got 2 photos in my wall. Martin Luther King Jr. and Hitchens, and the Martin Luther King Jr. The hating other people is too heavy a burden to bear. And I think, and I'll tell you, I do sometimes find myself hating, and I try really hard not to because it's bad, it's toxic. But look, I'm human. The Dalai Lama was talking about this, you know, that yeah, sure, of course he sometimes, you know, gets, so we all do. But so I said, A, I don't hate you, and B, your addle-minded constituents, which is what I called them, and for the particular branch of them, the subdivision of them I was talking about at that particular time, I think it was appropriate. But I said they, this constituency, I actually get why they're mad, and they may have a point. They may absolutely have a point, but that doesn't mean that you know, I'm not going to listen to their point if they end up electing Trump simply for spite. So we end up in this vicious circle where we're pissed at them, they're pissed at us, and you end up with the most divisive time since the Civil War. So, but what I wanted to say was, it's not just, so when you had first told me that, you know, yeah, I start feeling like I actually almost want to undermine these other values that I believe in, just because I hate the people, which it's not that you hate all the people, and you didn't say you hate the people, so let's not, I'm not, you know what I'm saying.
I felt so embittered at the time.
Yeah, and rightly so, I would have. But I remember thinking, I can't believe he kind of said that. He seems like a nice guy, and we're going to chat. But that was a statement that kind of bothered me. And then about 2 or 3 weeks later, and I had gotten into a few more, and I had to take, for medical reasons, about 8 months to a year off of Twitter. And,
oh wow.
Yeah, so I'm actually sort of reasonably new coming back in. So it's funny because
everything is good now, right?
Yo, it's great. It's marvelous. Everything's been completely cleaned up. Well, and it's funny too because there are people who do know me from before that, but a lot of the landscape's changed, and so there's some people who are like, "Oh my God, who the heck are you? You're brand new to Twitter." It's like, actually, no, but that's all right. But I had started getting I ended up with 4 or 5 more of these instances that's exactly like yours. And I remember I was picking my daughters up from school and I was just like, you know what? I swear to God, I'm going to come out and I'm going to start renouncing an atheist girl renounced a few and she said, I'm not going to oppose some of these groups, transgender groups or stuff like that, but I will no longer vocally support them in Twitter or any other. I may offer my private support, but I'm done. And I was sitting there going, I respect that and I understand that. And she got hammered for it. And I'm just sitting there going like, oh my God, can you not see? Can you not? And I remember, so I'm picking my daughters up, I'm leaving, and something had happened. And I flashed back exactly to what happened with you and what happened to a few other people. And I got so worked up and I was just like, I swear to God, I will start campaigning for hardcore Republicans for no other reason than to just fuck you. And I caught myself. I said it. I absolutely said it. I was so pissed. And then I was just like, oh my God, he was right. Because the other thing you had said was, they're really going to start alienating the people they need the most. I was like, it's not that bad. It's not that. This is a public apology, because it may not be that bad in other forums. I don't know. I do see some evidence of it being that bad in some, public areas and public settings. Other than Twitter, I look on television. I was like, ooh, there are people getting in trouble. But I'm a huge fan of John Oliver, and John Oliver.
Yeah. I love John Oliver.
He had on Anita Hill. Did you watch that one?
Yes.
That was great. And he started talking, and he said some things that ended up not being extraordinarily in line. And she very calmly and in a way that let him maintain his dignity. And she's like, well, what do you think would be the right way to deal with this? And he said, oh, and she said, if you saw sexual harassment, what would you do? Said, oh, I'd go and I'd, get rid of that guy, and I'd make sure that he was reported, and I'd make sure. She's like, okay, a masculine answer. Would you maybe consider coming to me and asking if I'm okay? And asking, and it clicked on him. And he's like, oh my God.
Yeah.
But if she had said, hey, asshole, you don't have to get into a fight on my behalf. Why don't you come make sure I'm okay? Why don't you? This was the most magnanimous. And he was in some ways shamed, because he was just like, oh God, I really can't believe I didn't. Because you could tell he thought of himself as really, progressive and all this, but he wasn't humiliated. And he was just like, you're right. You're absolutely right. But that happened because she was so magnanimous and so generous. And I was so impressed with Anita Hill after that. I was like, the fact that I have not followed her more. It was
pretty awesome.
Yeah. That was, so anyway, so I keep thinking of that, and I keep thinking of what you had said. And I just said, look, I'm having a hard time sometimes struggling with staying with Steve got into trouble because of, some very basic questions that he was asking and things that he was suggesting about just how is trans going to work in practical ways in some areas of the society. That's not to say they shouldn't, or we shouldn't find ways. It's not even to suggest that. It is to say, I see difficulties. How are we going to deal with it? And that's a good question. People should be asking those questions. And instead, it's like, oh my God, you're asking the question, you're a transphobe. That's it. And it's sort of like, he's not. And wouldn't it be nice if he felt embraced by that community that he embraces?
Right.
Yeah, I think that was one of the ones that came to Steve's defense as well.
Yeah, it was. Well, the other thing that gets me when all of this stuff starts is every single time someone comes up and says as a, and then assumes to speak for anyone that they share a demographic with. Demographics are not freaking hive minds. I don't speak for all men. I don't speak for all bisexuals. I don't speak for all white people. I don't speak for all anybody. Nobody does.
No, I speak for me.
Right. Exactly. And it is okay to say you're wrong. It's okay to say, no, I don't agree with you. Here's the real information, or whatever. But it bothers me when people take themselves up as like this. They put themselves on this pedestal. Like right now, I can speak for all whatever group, you know what I mean? When it's like, clearly there are people within your own demographic that obviously disagree with you.
I, as a woman, have said on multiple occasions, no, I have been a party to what you are talking about. I have been the victim of domestic violence. I have been the victim of multiple kinds of abuse. And I don't feel the way you are portraying that all victims of this should act or feel. That's not me. Please don't speak for me.
Right.
And I get jumped on. I get accused of not being a real woman, of lying about the abuse that I have endured.
You're my sock account.
I'm his sock account.
Oh
the
my
minute
God.
I don't jump on someone's bandwagon and echo their feelings and their thoughts, I'm not allowed to have my own.
That's that's horrible on so many levels. And you know, it seems to me that what any disenfranchised group, which is what we're talking about, disenfranchised groups in one way or another, what they are seeking is normalized relations with everybody else. And I don't think that that is supportive of that cause. I think they're doing themselves a tremendous disservice.
Well, just, you know, whenever there is a minority within a demographic, whether it be atheists or you know, trans people, or, you know, gay community, whatever, right? When there is particularly a vocal minority, it does make it harder to build acceptance and tolerance for that group, because you have these very vocal actors who are creating a bad image. The problem is, though, is now we live in the age of social media, where you know what, I need to get into a rant about Twitter and social media in general to really explain where I'm coming from here. So Twitter is, in particular, the worst combination. It's like the worst recipe for discourse imaginable. First of all, you have an algorithm. Think about this. You have an algorithm that props up the most reactionary things that will get clicks, right? It's monetized reaction. Then you have a system where you can't take anything back. Everything is forever. There is no edit. You are incentivized to react quickly, not to think about what you're about to say, but to very quickly react and just blurt whatever's out on your mind right away, and as few characters as possible.
That's a good point.
So you get all of these factors combined, and now you want to use that in the age of culture war.
Passion and rationality are not good bedfellows.
Well, sometimes they can be. They can be, but
not on a regular basis.
Rationality is difficult.
Hold on. Marital spat. What I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna take. Oh, I got odds. So what we're gonna do? Chat group. Odds. Anyone? 21. Oh, I'm sorry. Please continue.
No. So so you have all of that, right? And so now, any mistakes that these minorities within demographics make are going to be amplified and used as ammunition.
Oh yeah.
And they always have been, but in the age of social media, that crap goes global. It goes reactionary. It goes big and quick.
And then people start reporting you for anything that they can, just to like, oh, I don't like them, I'm going to report them and get them, you know, kicked off of the platform.
Well, the thing is, like, okay, for instance, right now, one of the things that's going like viral all over Twitter right now is, you know, Amy Schumer named her boy a name that basically comes out to what is it? Genital fissure.
Yeah,
genital fissure. Now,
I
hadn't heard that, but okay, that's
kind of.
He didn't believe me at first. He had to look it up.
I don't think I believe you now, but okay.
Yeah, go look it up.
I trust you.
Yeah. So that goes viral, right? And then of course now it's, oh look, feminism is so toxic. Okay, so that ends up becoming, for many people, the image of feminism. Now, I have friends who are feminists, and who I deeply agree with on almost everything. I have friends who are MRAs, you know what I mean? But once again, age of social media, an MRA does something horrible, and now that becomes the face of what an MRA is.
Whether they want it or not, that's the new poster child.
So one of the things is we're living in an age where we have to, if we want to promote our cause, no matter what that cause is, gay rights, LGBT rights, trans rights, minority rights of any kind, we've got to be careful. We have to be really careful. It is so easy to take 10 steps back for every step forward. So easy.
I mean, with the Amy Schumer thing, I think it should be considered a form of emotional abuse to name your child something like that. And children should not be there to be your political pawns.
Wow.
And that's a personal view. That's only my view. And when people do things like that, especially when they're in the media that way, especially when they are so recognized by people in their movement as big movers and shakers, and they do something like that, it really harms their movement, I think.
Well, yeah. Look at Neil deGrasse Tyson won't call himself an atheist, even though he doesn't believe in God, because he thinks the behavior of what an atheist is in the public, like when people think of an atheist, he's like, that's just not who I am.
Right.
Yeah. I'm not sure that that's why. That may be a factor. I think there are other factors.
He specifically said that. He
said, he did.
Oh yeah. He said people say, "Oh, you find out that I don't believe in God," and say, "Oh, so you're an atheist? Well, why don't you?" Da 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 da. He says clearly, what people think of when they think of an atheist is not who I am, so I don't call myself an atheist.
Well, Steve and I have had this conversation before, and we did one show on it, and I'd like to at least do one more on it and try to get into it even more a bit more in depth. But the amount of damage that atheists, as at least on Twitter, the ones I've seen, I have blocked more atheists than theists by probably at least 2 to 1, maybe higher than that. I haven't gone through and done the math. I block very few theists because they usually treat me with more dignity and respect than a lot of the atheists out there, and some of them, and I don't know what it is, but then they
I have an idea of what it is.
Yeah.
And you see this not just in it's a mentality that happens when anybody converts to something. I've seen it in theist, I've seen it in atheist. You leave one mindset, or for some people, one religion, and you go and you become something else. You become so impassioned about that new mindset. You have so much to prove to everyone in the community that you have to be the biggest, you have to be the loudest, you have to be the most impressive and aggressive with your beliefs and views just to prove yourself to everyone else. That sometimes you become a real jerk in the process.
That makes a lot of sense to me. I'm not sure. I haven't actually sort of like done a formal analysis of the people I blocked. It seems to me a lot of the ones I blocked, I think, were atheists most of their life. On occasion, a few of them, I think, I'm not convinced that they're not atheists just because they want to pick fights, and I think that's what atheists do. And they may, or I should say, anti-theists. So they're sitting there going, they're already an atheist, and they say, oh wow, I can go pick fights with people, and if I just say I'm an anti-theist or I dislike religion, that's grounds to try to humiliate and make people look bad. And I will say this, and this is important. This needs to be said. Hatred is fun. Hatred's a lot of fun. Hatred really feels good. I have to believe.
It's powerful.
Yeah. It is. It is. It's the Sith. The Star Wars could have gone so much more with this if they had really delved into the understanding of the power that comes from anger and hatred.
Sith so fast if there was force ability here. I tell you right now.
Thank God, because you're like, Nick, I disagree with you, and I don't know if force abilities can go through the screen, but I don't want to find out.
Did he just thank God? I'm triggered.
Oh,
outrage!
Oh no, I'm sorry.
See,
I'm
sorry. I would never force choke anybody. I would use the force to force your mind to think the way I do.
Okay, where's the mute? Where's the block? I haven't done this before. Can I perma ban?
Force choke is a waste of a little flesh robot.
What scares me is how much you've thought about this. Hatred is a tremendous amount of fun, and it's cathartic, and you necessarily put yourself superior to that which you hate. You really can't hate something that's on your level. So I have to believe that the KKK is loads of fun. I have to believe it's loads of fun. It's a bunch of people saying we are better than a whole other group of people, and just inherently, just born that way. We all agree. I have to believe that feels good.
This is why I like to yell at people on the phone when they fuck up.
Yes, that's exactly, because it feels good, and it's cathartic, and I totally get that, and I feel it too. I'm absolutely not immune, and especially when I get tired, especially when I start to lose some of those filters, that can happen.
Yep.
It doesn't happen when I get drunk. When I get drunk, I become a kitten. But so, but
I think that in general too, the atheist community and the rational community, and even the progressive left community in general, have a real problem admitting these kinds of deep faults within the human condition.
Yeah.
It is not an easy thing just to be a tolerant, progressive, or just tolerant individual.
Tolerance takes work. Hate is easy.
Yes.
Right.
Excellent.
And these things are deep in us. It's not like they just ever go away. We control them, we subdue them, we direct them.
I think you've really hit on something there, whereas tolerance is not, I almost think it's not natural. It's something that we've developed over many eons, where hate is a natural human reaction to protect ourselves and protect our tribe.
That's an interesting observation. That's a really interesting observation. That deserves more consideration. That it is true that society evolves and society becomes better, and we learn to function better, and hopefully we pass on the good values and we teach them. I think tolerance is one of those values. That doesn't mean we're naturally that way. It just means we've learned how to do it and pass that on, and hopefully we keep it, because if we bail on it, we could be in a lot of trouble.
If you look back over, like, if you're just going back through archaeological and words are hard right now, when you're researching the ancient humans, there's a whole section of education involved with that. But
anthropology.
Thank you, anthropology. You see, humans are naturally tribalistic, which means we are naturally going to want to fight each other to protect our own little group. And your group is bad, and we're going to wipe you off the face of the planet, and we're going to take your resources so that our group can succeed.
Well,
and that's not just resources nowadays, are thoughts. Resources are society, and how resources are how we can push society, the power behind society, the power behind government. And it's not just about land and water and food now.
Well, humans in general, evolution doesn't just invent things whole cloth, right? It takes what we already have and finds a way to reuse it and adapt it into a new thing. So all of those basic, animalistic, bestial urges and bestial desires and needs and instincts are all still there. We've just reappropriated them into our modern culture. We've directed them into things that are more suitable for our modern survival.
But I think where you're looking at the human condition and our evolution into better people is where you get compassion, where you get all of these other things that aren't necessarily as natural to
No,
us
I don't
as others.
necessarily think so. I think what we've done is we've taken our natural instincts for those things that are normally applied only to our in-group, and we have expanded what we view as our in-group.
I think that's kind of what I'm trying to get at, but you always have had a better gift with words and explaining things than I have.
But yeah, I think we just see our group bigger,
This is one of those, and this is actually why I disagree with Stephen Hawking. And I'm going to tell you how I brought Stephen Hawking into this, but I disagree with him on one. Because he had mentioned, he said, okay, he really doesn't want us to encounter aliens. And yes, aliens do tie into this topic on SJW. He doesn't want us to.
Don't you dare go flat Earth on me.
So as I was saying, we're going to discuss. We're going to go back to Martin Luther King Jr. again, because I don't want to. Apparently, I've been ordered to not go flat Earth. So he had said, look, if aliens encounter us, they're going to wipe us out, and the reason is to take a look at what the Europeans did to the Native Americans. Right. Okay, that's a fine argument. There's two problems with that. First of all, the Native Americans were actually on par with Europeans, in the sense that it's the same species, it's the same. Aliens that encounter us, we are a tiny speck to them. I mean, if they can actually find us, they have to be possessed of abilities beyond our even ability to understand, because somehow they're going to have to bypass the limitation on the speed of light, unless it took them a long time to get here. So they're going to be well in advance of anything we can do. So it's more appropriate to say what happens when human beings encounter a species of cats, feral cats, or whatever how do we interact with something that we see as somehow below us? And here's the interesting thing. It seems to me that the only way that we've achieved what we've achieved is to be able to civilize ourselves. It has been to actually, cultivate compassion, working together, cultivate understanding with people that you don't like. And it is these things that make us start to think about the environment, the ASPCA, about animals, about how they're being treated. And all of a sudden, we don't see everything around us as disposable anymore. We just don't. And it seems to me that the more we do that, the more that we go sort of try to revert to, hey, we can do whatever we want, the more we screw ourselves long term. And if we're going to survive as a species, it seems to me that, believe it or not, compassion and trying to engage, compassion, empathy, these are the things that are going to get us there, because they are responsible for the vast majority of the progress we've got. So, and if we don't, what are we going to do? We're going to nuke ourselves. We are going to completely obliterate ourselves off the face of the planet. And there's one theory, I've forgotten the name of it, but the theory that basically that's why we haven't encountered aliens is because 99% of all sentient life obliterates itself within a certain period of time once it learns how to develop nuclear weapons. But the exception would be a species that had compassion and a species that could work together and engage and had empathy and all these other things, and they could survive long enough to exceed well past us. They would be able to make spaceships and figure out how to warp space and get from A to Z. Some smart aleck here just said use a Stargate. Thanks a lot. How are we going to build the Stargate? Okay, I'm not going to get into it. And he said, quote,
sure
if we
somebody
find
out there on the internet has a diagram.
well, maybe he's thinking Mass Effect. So Mass Effect, there are actually Stargates out there, which is what he said. He said find a Stargate, but I'm going to straw man him in the spirit of this discussion and say that he was being an idiot and said not if we build one, which we can't do with advanced technology. So I want to straw man him. So, so my thinking is that in order for a species to actually survive to the point where it could develop space travel and go from planet to planet, it actually has to be reasonably compassionate. It can't do that giving into these tribal urges. So when it finds us, it will treat us with much more dignity and respect than Stephen Hawking suggested.
Well, we're going to go really super bizarre nerd here. I think Star Trek is a good example of what you're talking about. And
well, no, because he's talking about something so far beyond us.
Well, I know, but if we were able to interact with an alien species, they would have to be somebody very compassionate, not to want to wipe us off the face of the planet.
Compassion doesn't necessarily mean that they would care for us and see us as an equal. They might just take us home and be very loving pet masters.
Well, I did say empathy because I knew somebody was going to sit there and say, "Oh, he was talking compassion," so I had to drop the word empathy in there because they're two different things. So I knew what I was saying.
If somebody's willing to clean my litter box and pet me and give me treats, it might be okay.
That's a fair point. It depends on
what
the treats are.
What if the alien race that comes here is just a very long-lived species that actually is not a social group, a creature doesn't live in social groups, and so now you have a creature that has no instinct for things like compassion and empathy and working together, and just a completely solitary creature.
Why were you invited into this chat again? I don't remember.
Oh yeah, I'll see myself out.
Yeah, it's Growly Bites. Thank you very much. She's the one we wanted to talk to. You. Yeah, well, no, I think that
my litter box pets me and gives me treats. That's why.
I think well, that would keep me around. I'm really glad you like the cats. I'm thrilled you love the cats, by the way. So thank you for that. I love that. My wife gave that to me, and I don't know why she's not a huge fan. She's like, you can get rid of it. I was like, get rid of it. I love it.
It's gorgeous.
And there's airflow that comes. That's actually a door. If you look, that's a sliding door. And this used to be a living room, and I converted it to a home office. And that used to be a door, and that just keeps the draft out. So it's both looks gorgeous and is utilitarian. So,
well, I think she has fine taste.
I agree. Well, you say that, but she's just like, oh, this old thing, and I was just like, no. So I love it. So. And here's what I'm trying to do. So every now and then I see that, I see my name pop up in the chat. And this is the other thing. We were talking about some of the difficulties in running a show like this. And even in with my debate in SJ, she was reading the chat during the debate. And I was like, I'm here, I'm present, I ain't doing it. And I see hosts do that all the time. And Steve, when he's hosting the show, is like chatting away. And he's actually in the conversation while chatting away and doing all, and I'm sitting there going, what? So, and I did realize I guess I'm going to have to read the super chats at some point.
This one is pertaining to what you just said, actually. You might want to read that one.
Let's read it now. So, how can standards evolve or progress? Is there a standard? What would be the standard? Okay, and the chat's just moving.
To say another society evolved and is indeed lacking empathy.
Well, that's a really good question. I think you're going to get into relativism there. I think, however, and I want to try to not straw man this. I want to try to.
Oh, apparently they want you to read the super chats because you have a more pleasant voice.
Oh,
really?
God.
Yeah.
Okay.
How can standards, quote, evolve or progress? Is there a standard? What would be the standard to say that another society evolved and is indeed lacking empathy? Well, the thing is, by my theory, and I'm proud of this one because this is actually mine. I didn't get this from anywhere else. This is just something I've been thinking about and believed for a very long time. So when Stephen Hawking came out and said his thing, I was like, I don't think you're right. And it was really nice to be able to say I own a theory that I actually think is reasonably good. It's a simple one, but I think he's wrong. And I think if you take a look at the history of human evolution and what we know about, and we only have one species to compare with, but it seems to me, I don't think he's right. But here's the thing. So it's not about once a race. Okay. 99% of all the species on this planet has gone extinct. And we ask, why don't we see life anywhere else in the universe? And I'm kind of wondering if it's not the same for the universe. 99% of the sentient species in the universe go extinct. And there may still be a lot of life out there, just like there's a lot of life on this planet. But if 99% of them wipe themselves out, you're not going to see a lot of it. And especially if they do it after they develop nuclear technology. Once you develop something like that, it seems to me if you can't solve your differences, if you can't find a way to work together, you're going to extinguish yourselves. Now, the obvious
kind of a game changer, isn't it?
I think so, and I think you have to have evolved at least socially past a certain point, or you're going to kill yourselves. Now, yes, there could be despotism, there could be a single overlord who runs the whole show, and because of that is able to manage and keep things going in some way or another. But it seems to me he's still going to get a revolt. He's still going to have issues. There's never been a system like that we've seen that can sustain itself indefinitely. And with nuclear power, there's going to be a problem.
So I'm trying to taking this in. It's really interesting. So what you're saying is that these things that we observed in all social animals, to lesser and greater degrees, depending on the species, are actually survival instincts that are necessary to reach a certain stage of social and technological evolution without destroying ourselves.
Yeah, that's the argument. That's what I personally think. That's and I mean, we've seen it. I mean, when you take a look at oh God, when was it? October 90, not 92. Oh my God, 62. Cuban Missile Crisis.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We came very close to obliterating ourselves right off the face of the map.
Yes, we did.
It was the ability of a few people to get into the heads of other people in a positive way. There was also some of the just where's the strategy and how can we outmaneuver. But at one point, a few people said, look, how can we talk about this and work it out? And it was very close to not happening. It did, we're okay. But a species that has a greater capacity to do that, I have to believe has a greater chance of survival.
Right.
And especially when you start talking, here's the problem, suitcase nukes. We can make those reasonably easily.
Yeah.
We haven't in the U.S. We haven't made a lot in the U.S. We haven't made any in the U.S. that I'm aware of. Russia's made a whole bunch. They lost control of at least 7.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
It's not a small number, really.
No, it's not. Well, and
no number is a small number of suitcase nukes. One is a large number of unaccounted for suitcase nukes.
We could have a contest. How many unaccounted for suitcase nukes constitutes a problem?
One.
Well, so I'm a writer. I've got a whole bunch of books that I never got around to because I was sick for so long. I'm starting to get back into it, but I've been doing a lot of the social media.
Good.
So, well, thank you. But one of them, it's called Cities of Glass. I've got the first draft of it written, but it's about the Russians did do one smart thing with this thing, which is what they did was the triggers on them only last about 7 years. And that's intentional. The triggers decay and they can be replaced, but it's really hard to do. They place the triggers right next to the core. So you have to have a nuclear lab to replace the trigger. They could have.
Oh, fuck.
But that's the benefit. So what happens is after 7 years, the triggers fail and it can't be used. It's dead. It's a paperweight. It's a rather dangerous paperweight still, I suppose, but it's a paperweight after 7 years. So the theory is all of them are now useless. They don't know that for a fact because the decay rate on the triggers isn't, but the triggers were designed to fail after about 7 years. So if they lost control of those nukes after 7 years, but
where there's a will, there's a way.
Well, and that's what my book is about, which is a guy who's gotten a hold of one of these, and there's an undercover. I was inspired by, there was a biker who did an undercover stint. He was an FBI officer who went into Hell's Angels. Wow. And he wrote a book about being undercover in the Hell's Angels, and it's insane. It's insane. And so I said, I'd love to have a book about a guy who goes undercover with ISIS and also meets people he likes and ends up, but what they've done is they've gotten a hold of a suitcase nuke, and the entire book is them attempting to get a hold of and replacing the trigger on it. So they've already got the nuke. It's just the trigger that they need. So that's the book. I've already got a draft. So hey, I've plugged that. This is why I can just plug anything I want to.
How many of these suitcase nukes have made it into North Korea?
I suspect. Well, I was going to say I suspect none, and I was like, I really have no reason for that level of optimism. I got no idea. But I saw it. Oh, yeah, no, finish.
It makes me think and worry, and thanks. Now you got my brain working on all kinds of things. Thanks,
now you got me work. Hey, I wasn't the one who brought up North Korea. That is you. That is all on you. And there's all these people in the chat now who aren't going to sleep thanks to you.
Probably, you're welcome, everyone.
Yeah. Well, but to get back on track, the suitcase nukes sort of once again show you, are we as a species going to be able to right now? And it's dangerous and it's scary in this country because people are deliberately fanning the flames of this divisive politics, and you would use it earlier, but the sort of culture wars, and they're doing it for political gain, and it's a short-term game for an extent. And that actually gets back into the basics of capitalism, objectivism. We talked about this earlier too, and sort of the dangers of unfettered capitalism, which is what you've got in politics, which is people are saying, well, it may be dangerous, but it's sort of the cocaine or heroin of politics. It's dangerous, but it works. So I'm going to do it, and I'm sure everything will be fine. And then they've got a base and that's what happened with so the Republicans fed the Tea Party. And I said, yay, Tea Party. These are guys who are really energized, and they're going to help us out. And then the Tea Party ate the Republican Party, and serious Republicans got destroyed. John McCain got destroyed by this group that really decent Republicans got destroyed by the group my guess is
something I think that people forget. You just hit on something very important. Social media has gotten so crazy about your side, my side. We forget there's good people on both sides.
Yes, and I really appreciate
good Republicans, and there are good Republicans, and there are bad Republicans. There are good Democrats and bad Democrats. There are good people on all sides. And without the ability to have those open discussions, without jumping down everybody's throat, without tearing everybody to bits,
without drawing battle lines,
we will never. We're gonna put triggers on those suitcase nukes. That's what'll happen.
Well, I think what you just said. So everybody knows NonSec had a platforming controversy, and I know everybody loves it when I bring that up. But
Yes.
they had that platforming controversy, and I remember one of the things that troubled me the most was how much there was anger that said you have to have my side or you're out. And that anger wasn't coming from Kyle or Steve, because in fact at first I was actually against non-sec. Not enough that I was going to really get into it, but I DM'd Kyle and I said, and he said, "What's your opinion?" And I said, I think you should probably apologize and go for it. But I reflected on it, I thought about it, and I said, wait a minute, no, I think I'm wrong. I talked to people I really respect. And they said, Nick, I think you're wrong. And I think actually when you look at your own values, you're going to realize you're wrong. I was like, I don't think so. And then 5 minutes later, I was like, holy shit. So, I came out and supported non-sec, but I wrote an article on it. And in the article, I said, look, okay, there have been some mistakes. There's things that each side, there have been mistakes. Let's be honest. But here's why what they were doing was right. Here's why it was right in principle. Here's why, despite some mistakes, but it's stuff that everybody makes mistakes and they're going to learn, and they've addressed them. One of them was maybe vet and understand the histories of, and most of their problem came from the fact that nobody predicted the two sworn enemies were going to become friends. If that hadn't happened, everything would have been okay. But I know that was just the one unpredictable thing, and actually there would have been no real problem after that. What it was
I hate you. I hate you equally. I don't want to live anywhere near you. I don't want to live anywhere near you. We're friends now.
We're friends, and then we're gonna
get the whole Superman Batman thing having the same mother.
No, it was a they had, I sort of explained it to you, but they had a black nationalist and a white nationalist on the same show to talk about slavery.
Oh, I remember.
Yes, and they both got on the topic of ethnostates and went, we agree, ethnostates.
And then the show became about ethnostates. And if you're going to platform really bad people, you have to make sure they're opposed, and you have to make sure they're opposed well. And it just ended up being a fail. 9 times out of 10, they're opposed really well on that show. In this case, because there was a couple of things that went wrong, they went unopposed. Not without opposition that was practiced. They were practiced in their positions. There was nobody who practiced really opposing them. There was some opposition. I mean, they were getting pushback, but it wasn't. And this was the same thing when I debated SJ. I got a huge number of people who were sitting there going, "You can't platform her. You cannot debate her." I was like, "Unless I do it well." I was like, "You're assuming I'm not going to do it well, and it maybe I won't. I've screwed up before." So I did cede the fact that I'm not guaranteeing success here, but I am guaranteeing I'm going to do better than you think I am, and I'm guaranteeing I'm ready for it, and I know what I'm doing. This isn't my first rodeo. So and there were a lot of people who were, and I understand the objection. I think it's okay to debate certain people. You had brought this one up, Bill Nye.
Yeah, Bill Nye Ken Ham. He got a ton of shit for that, for doing that debate. Oh, you're legitimizing their views. Your thing is, though,
he destroyed Ken Ham, and Ken Ham's people admitted that Bill Nye won.
Some of them did, yeah. Some of them, yeah.
And he did it at the Creationist Museum.
Yes. Well, one of the things that I wanted to point out to people, and I came to your defense on this one, is they were saying that it's okay to put her on your platform, but going into their platform is the bad thing. And I was like, you don't understand. There are audience members who will never go to that other platform. But
how do you ever reach them if you don't go?
You have to go into their platforms. You have to, because the thing is the people who follow you to listen to you aren't going to be convinced by their arguments. But if you can reach even one person in their audience, that's a win.
Well, it's not necessarily a win because maybe you'll lose more. But yes, in principle, yeah, you got it.
Yeah.
You got it.
But also, everybody's like, oh, yay, people have been deplatformed and taken off of these different social media platforms that everybody hates and everything. And it's like, well, maybe that's actually not a good, thing that we need to talk with these people. We need to talk about these people. We need to give these people a chance to defend their views, even if they're garbage, because how do we ever show everybody else how awful they are unless we do this openly?
Don't lose where you're going to go, because I know you wanted to say something real quick, but I want to, the guy, the shooter, the New Zealand.
Oh yeah. Which one?
Yeah, well, the one. Yeah, so I remember when that happened. That was shortly after the platforming controversy. That was like days after the platforming controversy, and people blamed non-sec. People blamed non-sec for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sitting there going, are you crazy? They're like, well, first, I'm not saying it was because of things like non-sec. They were blaming non-sec, and I'm sitting there going, okay, at least could we be precise enough in the language to say that it's people like them, but how are you going to really make the jump that it's them to that? And what they said was, well, it's because you're platforming Nazis and so on and so forth. So they're okay, that still wasn't them, but let's get into that. And the idea that when that guy did all this, all he was talking as he was shooting and murdering people was saying stuff like, well, gee, you're listening to me now, you're gonna, and the guy who did I want to say Texas State, I don't think it was that one, but he did a post right before he did it, and he was like, you guys never listened to me, you never did when people are talking, they are not killing each other, period.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. No, there is something of a release valve that happens by letting some of these vile people spew their shit.
Yeah.
Yes.
Kitsune Cavalier said, as long as they don't have a mute button to control you. Well, absolutely. Yeah. I think there is some nuance there. There are some shows where you're not going to get a word in edgewise, and all you're going to do is help affirm their narrative and agenda.
You have to be intelligent about what you get involved in.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you for watching the live chat, because I can't, I will, and if I do, I don't get myself back into the convo very easily. So I'm glad somebody's watching. So thank you.
I forget the name of. There's been so many shootings, but the synagogue that happened,
which is a sad state in and of itself. Right there.
Yeah, that's right.
The synagogue that happened here in the States, I think it was about a year or so ago, and Twitter tried to blame the other platform for having hosted all of his stuff, and it turns out he wasn't even really on that much. He did most of his promoting of what he did on Twitter.
Well, and look, again, and so this is one of those. So when the platforming controversy came, I wrote a paper, and the biggest thing that it really said, the biggest takeaway was, and like I said, at first I criticized Kyle, and he said, "Thank you for your opinion. I appreciate it." And that was it. And it didn't seem to me. It seemed to me like there was genuinely no animosity. He was like, "Okay, Nick, I understand you disagree with me. That's it." So I was like, that was easy, and he was right, as long as I'm not yelling at him. And Steve got criticized because he shut down some people, but he was getting yelled at, and he was on his way out to vacation, and people are sitting there, and it's like, I understand him shutting down the conversation. I would have. There's nothing constructive. So one of the things I said was, look, there are people, genuinely good people on both sides, and there's some issues where you can sit there and say, yeah, the people on the other side really are. The KKK is a great one. That's those people. I've got serious objections to them on a personal level.
Yes.
But this isn't one of those. This is one of those where people have really good arguments on both sides, and even I flipped sides. So there are good arguments on either side to sit there and say, my argument is the only one, that's it, and if you disagree with me, I'm never speaking to you again. I'm going to call you names. I'm going to say you're a Nazi. I'm going to say you do, and it's sitting there going like, that is blind. It is unproductive. It is hateful. It's self-aggrandizing, and I understand why you feel that way. But to do that also to your friends, and then people are sitting there going, "Oh, the atheist community is tearing itself apart." Guess what? It really is.
It is.
It is. Well, let me put it to folks this way when it comes to arguments. Let's just say
I disagree.
Yeah. In fact,
awesome,
blocked,
good,
muted.
She
hasn't made her argument yet, but she hasn't made her argument yet. Okay, yes, ma'am. It's Mother's Day. I have to.
Exactly. Put yourself in a position of a preteen or teenage years, and your parents are yelling at you, not letting you get a word in edgewise, telling you whatever it is you've done is so horrible. Yeah. How much are you tuning out your parents, putting up your walls, and saying, fuck you, I'm going to do whatever I want the minute you turn your back?
In fact, now I'm going to do it because you told me not to do it just to spite you.
Exactly.
Yep. There's an empowerment to that. I think that's a really excellent point. And we got from Jim Majors $3. Nick or Steve, can't pick which one to marry. I don't know what to say.
I believe you're married and Steve isn't. So unless you want to,
I suppose that's no, that's true.
Hold on, can you marry one and just have the other as a
on
mistress?
The side?
Are you judging my polygamist tendencies now? Didn't we just have this discussion? Have this discussion?
Being an ex-Mormon? Fuck yeah.
Yeah, that's right. I gotta watch that. Okay. Wait. Mormons let you do that? I think I just found my religion.
Well, what's funny is technically in the doctrine.
Oh, let me hit this one up. I'm the ex-Mormon here.
Go for it.
So, as there are two different sects of Mormonism at this point, the reorganized and the standard version. The reorganized still practice polygamy right now. Now, the standard version say that they don't practice polygamy because they have to obey the law of the land. However, I have known several that do, as long as they don't get caught.
Yeah.
Everything is good. Now, in their doctrine, it says we have to obey the law of the land, so you can't have multiple wives while they're alive. Now, if your wife dies and you got sealed to her, you could get married to another woman, get sealed to her, let her die, get married to another woman, get sealed to her, let her die. You'll have all these women that are your wives in the afterlife.
Oh, that's clever. That's well thought out. Mormonism
women,
loophole.
But women, if I was married to, if Ansgar and I were Mormon, we got sealed, he died. I could not get sealed to another man unless I got unsealed to him first.
John Peterson's wanting to come in, wants a link.
Oh, okay. Steve's probably going to have to take care of that because I don't. Oh, you know what? I think I may actually be able to make a link from here. I am very new to this, so everyone's going to. Okay.
So, I was going to say kind of on point though. Like one of the things, the atheist being in the atheist community and being in the specifically the atheist community. The reason I got involved was because I wanted to do activism, and the major form of activism I wanted to do wasn't. Now I'm a big LGBT activist. I have been for a long time, but that wasn't my main thing. My main thing is I wanted to normalize godlessness and bring more representation for godlessness and secular human values into the legal system.
All right. Here's what I'm going to do. I want you to finish what you were saying, and it makes perfect sense. I'm going to put the link in the live chat, which I think is probably okay, and I'm going to give Steve like 30 seconds to respond in case it isn't. But we've had people come in, and I think I can moderate it properly, so I don't think there's going to be a problem. But I am going to put it in the live chat, and anyone who wants to come in should be able to. I'm assuming I'm not just like giving them moderator privileges. If I am, it's going to get interesting really quickly.
So quick question, real quick.
Yeah.
I know that you want me to read live chats. Do you want me to read it in my normal voice or sex phone voice?
It depends. Am I gonna have to pay? Well, am I gonna have to pay $9 a minute?
Maybe. I mean, I'm kind of broke right now.
Oh boy. This is Steve's account. Yes, to the $9 a minute.
So I was gonna say, so I think what disappoints me more about this than anything is not only. I mean, yes, there's the upsetness, like this is supposed to be the rational community. This is supposed to be a community where it's safe to talk about anything and have discourse about anything and stuff like that. But the biggest thing to me is, like, if we're going to make any progress, making it, for instance, acceptable that a presidential candidate can come out and say, I have no faith and still get elected. If we're going to make that kind of progress, we can't draw fucking battle lines every time we have a slight disagreement, because a lot of this transgender sports stuff is a slight disagreement. You're talking about people who are both on both sides saying, yes, trans rights are important and we need to normalize and make acceptable trans in this society. And then there's this minor little disagreement over maybe there's an advantage in sports, and battle lines are drawn. And I find that ridiculous.
I'm glad you brought us sort of back to the topic, because one of the things is minimize the risk of. See, okay, now I'm trying to read this again, and that's not a good idea. So one of the reasons I wanted to do this tonight, and I wasn't sure I'd be available tomorrow, but so there was you were again in trouble, and I had to come bail you out as always.
How much do I have to pay you back for bailing him out?
Well, we'll see. The damage hasn't been calculated yet.
Right.
What did you get into this time?
Well, no, it was. Yeah,
I didn't say that. I just said what I just said. I said, hey, let's not draw battle lines. Let's not burn up. I think I said, let's not torch communities and friendships over what should be a discussion. I didn't even take a side.
No, you had asked a question. I'm willing to actually reasonably take a bit of a side, and I may get into trouble for this. But yeah, I don't like the fact that Steve's the only one getting into trouble. So, so we had this conversation.
Jealous of the attention, Nick.
I am very jealous of the attention.
Well, I did point out one mistake. Somebody said that one person said that things like height and limb length give an advantage in certain sports, right? And someone just posted wrong.
Yeah.
And I said,
ask any boxer. What do you think?
And I posted an article.
Yeah, exactly. I know the article.
Talking about why reach is important in boxing.
Oh, I just saw Jim and he bailed. I saw Jim, he bailed. So Jim, you're close to getting in. I don't know if you've been pre-blocked. If this were my channel, that would certainly be the case. But we just sort of, not after the marriage proposal. I can't. I have to take this.
Anyways, go ahead. Tell what you saw. Yeah.
Well, so no, that's what I saw, and you were sitting there asking some legit questions, and she was jumping all over you, and she was also just saying wrong, wrong, wrong. And then you or somebody had said, well, why don't you state an argument? And she goes, I can't make an argument until they make an argument, and they haven't made a formal argument yet. So I said, well, wait a minute. He's made a statement, and the statement, you can actually imply the argument from that, and why don't you go from there? She's like, oh, well, you know nothing about philosophy, do you? I was sitting there going, whoa. I was like, okay, that's a good, okay, that's where we're going to go. And so we were talking a bit. I started talking about what logic is and what an argument is, and she goes, well, it's clear to me you know nothing about philosophy, and maybe you should have a philosophy class. And I was just like, yeah, I'll get back to you on that one. And but she went on a whole bunch of other stuff, and then she started using sex and gender interchangeably. Thank you. And I said, well, they're not interchangeable. Sex is a medical distinction. It's a biological distinction. Gender is a social distinction. And she went off on me for that, just went off on me for that. And she did a couple of things. First of all, she's like, oh, now you're a medical doctor. I was like, no, but my wife does have a PhD in biochemistry. And if you'd like to speak with her, I can get her on the line. Biochemistry, PhD. Why don't we, and then she had said, well, you do realize that there's XXY, right? I was like, yeah. And what are you saying? I don't understand what you're saying. Like, well, there's no real difference between she goes, all sex is hormones. And I'm sitting there going, that is a completely indefensible statement. That is an indefensible statement. And she's like, well, name one difference. I was like, very simple. If you are gendered female, so you're transgender, you are gendered female, but your sex is male, it's probably a good idea to start getting prostate exams in your mid to late 40s. Period.
Yeah.
Period. You have to do it. It is a medical necessity. You can't sit there and say, well, I've had hormones, so I don't need to be checked for prostate cancer. You are denying medical facts. I'm sorry, that's the facts. And then she said, well, she started getting into it, and I was like, and if you are sexed male, gendered female, but you're sexed male, you probably will never need to get a gynecological exam. That's just a guess. You don't need to be checked for cervical cancer. You don't need to be checked for ovarian cancer. You're never going to need a pregnancy test. That's another. And I'm sorry, but there are different medical treatments. I hope someday we can
get past that to the point that is something that they'll need.
That would be awesome. That would be
but
awesome.
But as it stands right now, it's not.
Well, and here's the thing, which is I'm getting a little older, so I'm starting to get breasts, and it would be nice if I could just become a woman and then just get that solved. So I'm
hey, but you don't have to. You can always just feel yourself up. It's cool. I do it all the time.
You do it all the time, but I somehow suspect it's different. I personally don't find it as sexy, and I'm sitting there going like, no, I don't like these. This doesn't work. But so, and then, she was just jumping all over me, and I'm sitting there, and then she's like, well, you know nothing about logic or philosophy. I said, okay, tell you what, I know a show. Steve McRae hosts a show. It's called Ask a Philosopher. Why don't you go on to that show? We can both be on together, and go on to that show, and we will ask the philosopher. Oh, he just came in and out again. Maybe he's getting booted. If somebody could check in the live chat.
Is there like a waiting room or something?
Well, maybe I can check. There's the participants. I'll take a look at this while I'm talking. But so why don't you go into? And it was funny because I'm just sitting there going, I know I'm being a little smarmy, but at this point, she had already called me a Nazi too, because apparently disagreeing with her makes you a Nazi. And she said a few other.
These people don't know what a Nazi is. They fling the word around a lot.
Well, and then she asked me a question. She asked me
Nazis because I won't I won't give them the pleasure of being called a Nazi. Okay, why am I going to take somebody who hero worships Nazism and basically call them what they would see as Superman? Fuck that. I'm just going to call them racist piece of shit. But
So he keeps getting booted. So it may be Nacho is here and Nacho got booted. So whoever comes in is instantly getting booted. I do not know why, and I assume there's a way to control
my greatness.
But that person that we're talking about, one of the things that they said was that they told me basically about all the abuse that they suffered, and then said, "But please tell me more of the reasons why you refuse to back reality and human rights." Like what?
The argument doesn't make sense.
Like, when did I ever? First of all, again, I hadn't even taken a side in that argument.
No, you hadn't. You absolutely. I will certify you didn't. I will certify that in a court of law.
all I was trying to do was bring down the rhetoric and Okay, hey Jim.
Hello.
Ah, shoot! I wanted to make myself look good for Jim. He's coming
and
on.
Nacho and lots of people.
Nacho.
Everybody.
Oh my goodness, there's a lot of people. Hi everybody.
Jim's here twice. He is cheating. He's here twice.
Oh, I'm here twice.
Yeah.
Two Jim.
Well, kick one of them. We don't need both those fuckers here.
Okay, let me see.
I rang at a few
the ugly one.
I wasn't sure whether I was getting through or not.
If there's a Jim without a mustache, kick him.
He's gone.
That is
the ugly one.
That is a glorious mustache.
I was going to say we all pale in comparison to Jim's mustache.
No, you know what pales is my
skin mustache.
Because I have not been it's been raining here nonstop, just nonstop.
Oh, cry me a river.
I don't have to. There's a fucking river in my backyard.
I would love to have that problem.
Right. So I want to finish on this, and I want to get to everybody because there's so many people here, and I'm glad that there's more filling it out because it's going to make it much more interesting. But so she first of all, she's had clearly serious trauma in her life, so I do understand that she's getting upset and angry. But yeah, again, she's doing herself a disservice because people are getting. I'm mad at her, and I'm sitting there going, listen. You're calling me names. You're saying I'm a Nazi. She asked me a question. I answered it 3 times. And she said, you never answered it. I was like, I did answer it. And then she said, well, you're answering this one. It turns out she asked a second question. I have 2 girls that I had to feed dinner to. So I got up, did that, and I come back and I got 6 from her. Oh, I'm waiting. What's your answer? I was like, I've got a life. And then I missed that she asked another question because there's 20. And she's like, you're lying. You knew the question. You knew this. You knew that. And I was like, okay, I've stated facts that are absolutely true and undeniable. And I'm trying to have a conversation because I want to understand your position more. And I'm just an asshole for doing all that. And like I said, I was snarky. And I said, why don't you come on the show? And I invited her onto this show. I did not mention that. I said, look, I know the host. I can get you on. I was a little coy about the fact that I was going to be the host for it. But nonetheless, I would have been fair. And I'm kind of glad she didn't because I think we're going to have a better conversation, quite frankly. And I think more progress is going to be made and there's going to be more understanding. But so she starts, and then a few other people jumped in on my side and said, Nick's not a transphobe and he's actually a really nice guy and give him a shot and talk. And she's just like, no, boom, blocked. And I was just like, this, I really want to understand. I know you're in pain and it's legit. I want to understand how this is helping your cause. And now I feel like because I've been nailed as transphobic, I've been hated. And so is Steve. And I'm sitting there going, all these good people are getting nailed for mentioning these things. And I'm sitting there going, there are some genuine concerns, and it doesn't mean no, it doesn't mean yes, it doesn't mean you've sided on anything. It means I'm asking questions, and apparently that makes you, it just
Well, the whole problem is that there's only one accepted response to these things. There's only one accepted method of input or perspective, input from a certain perspective that's allowed. You're not allowed to ask questions. You're not allowed to go against what they say. They know why they believe it. They know why they hold that position, but they think everybody else should know why they hold it too and hold the same one, and without question. And that's the problem. We see the same thing happening in churches. You can't question the Bible in church because somebody from the church will jump right up and say, well, you're not supposed to question that because this is what it means. And that's just unquestionable. And how dare you even attempt to slanderize that, or how dare you even attempt to show it in a different perspective. And that's the thing, is that in any argument that you have, I don't care how controversial it is, the more perspective that you have being put into the conversation, the better the conclusion will be.
Oh, you're absolutely right.
Are we to the point now where just disagreeing with a member of a protected class is now taboo?
Well, no, because actually that's what's expected in atheism. Or in certain communities, you're expected to agree with a certain position without questioning it. It's expected of you, and if not, well, then your character is immediately brought into question, if not totally thrown out with bathwater. It's awful. And Rationality Rules. So I hung out with him in Austin for 2 days. I gave him a ride around in my truck, him and 3 other people. We were all, well, no, I was designated driver. I wasn't shit-faced. Everybody else was shit-faced but me.
I so wanted to be there. Oh, God.
But he never, ever once gave me the vibe that he was homophobic, transphobic, anything like that. In fact, one of the first conversations that we had was, yeah, I got some bad information on one of my videos. I'm going to have to go remake one of my videos whenever I go back home. And I was like, that sucks, man. That really sucks. I'm glad, but he's like, but people are being understanding about it, and I think, right. And he said,
little did he know.
He said something along the lines of, I think I did some effective damage control before I left. And now, after all this had blown up, I just can't help but thinking, like, I just want to ring him and be like, dude, I'm sorry, on behalf of my community, this is my community, Yeah. And he was a guest in my country. And for somebody like the ACA, and the ACA has done me dirty. I was supposed to speak on Atheist Day in Austin, travel to Austin to speak on Atheist Day, and they pulled me out because I had resigned from Atheist Republic, and they all just said, "Oh, well, we just don't want to cause any conflicts or anything like that." And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, well,
have you watched any other shows?
Right, exactly. And it's not like I was there representing Atheist Republic. I was there representing myself. Yeah. And considering all the work that I put into Atheist Day, I think I deserve that, but that's neither here nor there. But it's the same thing. It's these knee-jerk reactions. It's these, and they're knee-jerk reactions for a reason, and it's because our community has degressed into a community that demands you hold a certain position, and if you don't, you are immediately denigrated. Immediately.
One of the effects I can say is it's had on me personally is subjects I used to be very passionate about, like a passionate activist about. I now almost entirely avoid putting my voice out there because the people that I support are going to jump down my throat.
You were arrested for protesting for trans rights. You were cuffed.
Yep.
Yes. Really?
Yes, he was cuffed.
Wow. Was it unlawful protest or?
Oh, it was a sit-in. I was not where I should be. It was on private.
It was trespassing.
Well, either way, good for you. Bravo. You have my complete respect. Thank you for doing that.
Well, thank you, man. I just, that's the other thing that bothers me is people think that they type a few words into the void on Twitter and now they're a fucking activist. Go out and do something.
Sure. Yes, exactly. And activism can be done through Twitter, but if you don't have that platform, then you need to build that platform, and you can only build that platform by getting out.
Yeah.
Well, and meeting people. It really
upsets me when people accuse him of being, transphobic and gay phobic. We've got 3 kids. I've got a son that 2 of them are definitely bi, 1's straight, and. What, we're going to be anti our kids? We support our kids. You tell me that my husband is anti these people and I watch him every day support our kids? Fuck you guys.
Sure, but surprised how many time though. In the same breath, you might or might not be surprised at how many parents throw their children took the words out right out of my mouth. As soon as legally possible, they throw their children out. So usually on their 18th birthday, and they're not welcome back home.
No, it happens all the time. My ex-husband, he's their biological father, and the first time Obama was elected, my eldest has always been very political. He sat bolt upright in bed that morning and said, "Who is president?" Obama. Then he asked about gay marriage. I said, "No, it didn't pass." And he started crying. He says, "My dad hates me." Little boy, and he always says, "My dad hates me," because he knows that his actual father voted against gay marriage.
Well, and the woman that we were having this argument with had a difficult history, and clearly her immediate family, and she said this, I'm not outing anything, she was very public about this, did not accept her. So I do understand that there's a lot of pain there, but you're creating enemies faster than friends when you take people who have been arrested fighting for these very rights, and you're gonna call them Nazi, you're gonna call them transphobe for saying, look, here are some genuine and they're honest questions. I don't have answers to them, and I think they need to be asked. And just by asking them, it sort of implies that you're trying to poke holes in the, and I'm going to say trans agenda. That sounds negative because we use it. I have an agenda. I mean, there's an atheist agenda. There's agendas to everything. So
everybody has an agenda. They've
got an agenda, and it's like if I ask questions, the difficult questions, I'm trying to poke holes in it. I'm trying to ask the questions that somebody's going to have to answer at some point. And we're actually, fortunately, to that point where we can do it. The only other one thing that I think somebody has asked me, how am I going to know when race relations are really, let's hope, but when race relations are really solved in this country? And I said, first of all, when you don't have privileged white people anymore per se, but when a white guy can make race jokes in front of the races that he's making fun of. And it's not to say that I begrudge, because right now you've got Carlos Mencia, you've got a whole bunch of people who make these race jokes, and it works, and they do a great job. But the reason is because there isn't the power disparity. White guys can't do that for a very legit reason. I'm not lamenting. That's the other thing. People say, oh, well, why do you think? I understand why. I agree with why. But once that disparity isn't there, white guys will be able to make black jokes, and people will laugh at them, and nobody's going to say, oh, that's a terrible thing. You have to remove the power disparity. We're nowhere near that, but that's how you know it's done. When the issues that used to really offend and upset people, you can laugh at. And
I almost think it's the opposite. I think that we made more progress on race relations by making fun of it with brilliant satirists like George Carlin than we ever did by being offended by everything.
I think you're right.
But away from these idiots.
When they can do it, and really what I meant to say actually more was like when you can walk into your office and tell those jokes.
Oh, fair enough.
That's when you know. That's when you know we've solved.
It's a good barometer, is what you're saying. Yeah.
Because I was asked what was the barometer? How do we know? And that's when the jokes aren't offensive and people can laugh at them. I went to a Cat Williams concert. I loved it. Cat Williams is so underrated, but he is actually underrated. He's the black community knows him real well. A lot of white people are like, who? It's like one of the funniest comedians ever. But he's really hasn't seeped into the sort of white consciousness. He's hilarious. I love him.
He's great. I just want to say, like, real quick before we get too far off track, I don't know if you guys have already covered it, but for anybody watching and for those who are going to be tweeting about this, I just really encourage you guys to to see both sides of this. And I want you to say, not saying that ACA was correct in their actions, but I'm saying that we do not need to be that way. We do not need to be so quick to say, well, we need to boycott ACA. We need to stop watching ACA. We need to start trashing them. We need to start doing this. But that's not what we need to be doing. What we need to be doing is pointing out the general problems within our community and addressing them one by one. We don't need to be segregating our community any more than it already is.
Don't respond to fracturing the community by fracturing it further.
Could I add something? What Jim just said is, I just want to say that I watched Rationality Rules video after the fact, and Matt Dillahunty posted in the comment section that he agreed with Rationality Rules. That he was on his side. So when Jim says, "Hey, let's not go after the ACA," well, there's a big member of the ACA who was in Rationality Rules comment section, on Rationality Rules side.
Thank you for
saying that he shouldn't have. Yeah.
I had no idea, and I think that's great. And I want to let a few other people talk because I'm going to end up starting to dominate the conversation. But what I do want to say is, so I put that video up as soon as I was made aware of it, and I think Jim just hit the nail on the head. And he said roughly the same thing. And I don't think anybody should make up their minds until they've seen both sides. Don't listen to us and sit there and say, "Oh, it's a problem." And I said at the beginning, everybody here in this room, in this chat room, owes so much to ACA. We really do, and the atheist experience and all. We owe a lot to them. So
they've been around for 20 years, 20 plus years.
But it's not just about that. What I'm saying is that within our community, even when a decision is made, that decision does not need to be stop watching these people, stop supporting these people. That is not the decision that needs to be made. When it comes down to the point, if and when we decide that ACA is wrong, then that is when we need to correct that action from within, when we need to approach them in a respectful way, giving them the respect that they deserve, damn it. It's like Nick said, they have done so much for our community, and this one slip up and we're going to treat them like shit. I mean, I have a reason to hate them out of anybody, but I love Eric Murphy and I love Jamie Boone, and they are two of the greatest guys. And even though that Jamie is a president, and it was most likely Jamie Boone's decision, I still have nothing but respect for them. And in the end, I want what is best for our community, and what's best for our community is to fix the problems, not get rid of them.
I'm going to say I'm going to say one thing, and then it's John's turn, and then so just the one thing I want to say is, and this is exactly what we're talking about, which is also holding us to that same standard that I'm saying that the trans groups and others should hold to, which is we don't just get reactionary. We don't say, "Oh my God, they screwed up, let's jump on them." That's the last thing we should do, and that's precisely what we're talking about. John, what were you going to say?
Well, two quick things. One, to be fair and to clarify, Matt Dillahunty, he didn't, put some big elaborate post, but Rationality Rules explained himself in that last video, after this had happened, and Matt posted, and I think it's one of the top comments, "I agree." He was very short and sweet to the point. So don't go there looking for, some. And then the other thing I wanted to ask Jim, off of what he was just saying, is there some kind of big backlash going on now in the wake of this against the ACA?
Yeah. I see it. I wasn't even aware. Everybody on social media sees it. But I want to clarify though that the problem isn't with. So the problem is with ACA's hasty decision, with their knee-jerk reaction. But the problem is because our community has become that community that is so quick to throw people out because they have different perspective, because they have a different view, or because they support or don't support somebody. Damn it, especially with people like ACA. Well, I mean, why would anybody disrespect them for making a decision that they felt in that moment was best for their company, right, wrong, or indifferent?
Red, did you have something you want to say?
Yeah, so I want to say about the whole dividing the community thing. I mean, you think the way you're laying out, coming on a stream like this, the actions and strawmanning, kind of some of the
I'm not strong.
Time. Let's let him finish. Let's let Red finish and say what he's got to say.
Yeah, I'm talking about in the beginning of this. You're blowing out what the ACA did, coming in here bitching like, oh, we can't even have a discussion about this. This is blown way out. Blowing this way out. Don't you think that's poisoning the well for the people that see this here? And it's going to create that divide you don't want to bring in. I mean, you're talking about the nasty behavior that you think everybody else on this side is doing it, and then you're going to come over here and pretend like you're not doing it here to them.
Sure, and I can see that. I can see where you would think that, but I'm not pointing at any one individual. I'm not making a generalization here. What I am doing, I am pointing out the problems that are in our community and that are recognized. And if it's one of those things where I don't want to segregate my community. I don't, but at the same time, I don't want people in the community who are not for the progression of that community. I am all about progressing our community and about removing the negative stigmatism that has been applied to atheism. And if somebody is not properly representing the community, then they need to be called out. But it doesn't need to be done in a knee-jerk way. There are people who make knee-jerk reactions, and it's because people have a tendency to judge people, to prejudge people, and to make ultimatums, and that's a huge problem.
Well, and let me say one other thing, which is maybe it's saying, oh, nobody's being allowed to reply is unfair. And I will say, I saw their chat room tonight, and there was a lot of chats that way. You know, if you've got a chat room, you got to keep, I do understand you got to keep it under control. So if a lot of people are saying things about a controversial issue, I can see why they're going to want to. It still looks bad to see them just blocking everything, but I get it, and you've got to weigh some concerns there. But
sure.
The thing is, hold on, I just want to get this thing out, and I'm sure Red has a response. But the thing is, maybe saying, okay, we haven't been allowed to reply, although they seem to not be listening to people's objections. But it still may have been unfair. But the first thing that Jim said, the first thing that I said, the first thing that Rationality Rules said is, listen for yourself. Go see both sides. Nobody here has said don't look honestly at both sides. So I think your characterization that it's straw manning, you may have a bit of a point on one thing he said, but when we open up with go look at both sides, and when we open up with, hey, everybody in this room owes something to them, it's a little difficult to swallow the notion that we're straw manning them or being unfair. That I find a little difficult to swallow.
Right. Well, and it seems like, you know, there are people in our community, and you can call it strawmanning or whatever, but it's an observation that I've made, and people tend to start up these bandwagons, and if you jump on, you're accepted, and if you jump off, you're not accepted. And these bandwagons have come through so many times to the same place, picking up the same people, that we've created a canyon, a divide in between, right in the middle of the atheist community, just a huge schism right through it, and it's the ruts of bandwagons. And
I have to go.
You need to go?
I need to go in just a second, but I wanted to leave by saying, I'm not. At no point am I going to say that, you know, every single atheist or the entire atheist community is caught up in these battles. But it's also another thing to pretend like this isn't a growing trend. You know, we're seeing battle lines and schisms all over different little, not just the atheist community at large, but smaller communities even within the atheist community. And this happens with a lot of different things. It's not just atheism that does this. You know, look at all the different sects of Christianity we had that flourished, for instance, just during the revivalist period, because you know, one person would get a slightly different idea, and now, oh my God, we can't be associated. I have to create my own church. You know what I mean? And the thing that can happen even in science fiction fandoms or comic book fandoms or whatever. I think humans just tend to this kind of thing, and without careful watch, without carefully addressing the problem and attempting to say, hey, look, this is a bad trend, we got to do something about it. I think it's only natural that that's what we're going to fall into, is just tribalism that tears it apart.
All right, well, thank you. I do want to give Red. Red's been phenomenally patient. I think he probably wants to respond to a number of things we said.
Sorry, Red.
But thank you very much for coming on the show tonight. And I'm not saying you have to bail right now, but thank you for coming on the show, and thank you for doing this. And I'm
Have
really
a good
glad.
night, everyone.
Yeah, good talking to you, Ansgar.
Yeah, it was great.
All right, so Red, you have the floor.
All right. Well, what I was trying to get in at with, you know, just saying, I'm talking more about the beginning of the stream and not necessarily everything Jim was saying and putting everything on Jim here, but
just me at the beginning of the show.
Yeah, bringing it up. Well, you, Ansgar, and Growly over it, is that you go and you know, those whole shun, get them away and stuff like that with the ACA remarks. Now, this seems I said this.
Did we say or suggest that? I could be wrong. I don't recall saying or suggesting either of those things.
Not towards the ACA, but that they were doing it to Stephen, Rationality Rules.
I'm not sure I said that either.
Well,
okay.
It might not have been you. It was probably more heavily implied by Ansgar and Growly in the beginning, but
I missed that.
I missed it.
I left a couple of comments when it came up.
Okay. Well, I'll look at them. I'm interested in hearing what you have to say. But
yeah. All right. Well, and then but what I'm getting at is, so the ACA thing seems different. There seems to be a lot of disconnect between the board and the talent, and the talent seems to have a bit more free reign with who they bring on than just from watching this on the outside. So like the talent's not against them or anything like that. And but I've said this in a big stream discussion like this last night with Ansgar. We were arguing over it again. If their thing is, we're going to stand by trans people, and that's our community goal. It's not a knee-jerk reaction to distance yourself from clearly transphobic video that Rationality Rules put out. Now, it doesn't mean that Stephen's, gung-ho, take him out to F-drag and stuff like that kind of thing. But it's on the level here. I mean, it's not just, oh, I have an opinion, this stuff here. He's making an argument to take action against trans people. And he was using a lot of, like the two big things were the fear-mongering at the end. If something isn't changed now, women's sports is dead, and I don't want to see Y chromosomes dominating here in his video. So it's all that stock fear-mongering. So if their thing is, we stand with the trans community, and that's part of their principles and all that other stuff, then distancing yourself from that kind of video, even if Stephen's since changed his mind and we finally get that apology video and he corrects everything, then you can turn around, and if they continue to say, no, you said that once in the past, and hey, you might have an issue with it if he fixes it later and they still say, nope, can't have you around, then I think there's more fair criticism for it. But the stuff here is that, you bring someone on who's saying these, who put out this big, 230,000 views right now, arguing for action against trans people that was transphobic. Distancing them from them is, consistent with their principles, right? But yeah, go ahead.
Well, I'm going to interject two things, and I'm going to probably start to want to move on in a little bit, because I'm interested in this topic, and it's actually it is going along the lines. I don't want to turn this into the battleground for that discussion. But I guess the two things I would want to say is, first of all, he hasn't done his modified video yet. That's true. But he immediately apologized to the community. It wasn't one of those apologies either where, like, I'm sorry people took offense of. He owned it. Now, you haven't seen the follow-up, which is a fair observation, because who knows exactly how much and what he's owned. But the fact that he owned it quickly, and the fact that he owned it before he was actually, being, you said distancing themselves from him, and I took what they've done to be much, much more than distancing themselves from him. There's a difference between distancing and saying, listen, we're going to have to review this, we're going to have to think about this, we're very disturbed by what we saw, we hope he will correct the problem. There are different ways to approach it. This wasn't distancing, this was sort of cutting off, and he said throwing under the bus. I'm not sure I'd go quite that far, but I understand why he sees it that way. So I think distancing is a very charitable way to view what happened, and I think there were other routes, and I think since he immediately took steps to address it, as much as he can be expected to do in the short period of time, he's going to do a video and he's going to try to do it well. So I do admit that things have to hinge on what comes out with that video. I see that opinion. I see that they should reserve distance and be cautious until then, but it did still strike me nonetheless as rather reactionary.
I mean, it seemed pretty stock. We let somebody on our program that we didn't who has said things that we didn't take or have enough control over before letting them on, and we let them on anyways. Now, I think that's part because there seems to be a disconnect between the ACA board and the ACA talent who are friends with Stephen, right? And so I think that disconnect plays into this situation. But the response, their statement was pretty stock. Hey, here's this mistake here. But as for things Stephen said online since the video, he said plenty of things that would make a sense that in between that and then in between the what seems to be the apology and then some stuff after. So he did, right in the initial reaction to it, he left a comment on Noel Plum's video and said, spot on, you nailed it. All right. And now from everything I've gathered from everybody talking, he didn't change his mind until he got to Faithless Forum and had that discussion with other people. But since then, he seems to be making comments that, well, you're going to be disappointed in the apology. It doesn't sound like he's going to take a full 180 with some of the stuff he's leaked out about it. And so other people are, I think, perfectly fine to be upset about it because it doesn't look like he's going to correct his mistake. And, so that's where a lot of this other stuff is coming from, because he's made other comments in here and stuff here. And my guess is he's going to run with the no plum argument, right? He's going to back off the fear mongering and take the no plum argument, which isn't going to resolve the transphobic video he made, right? It's not the kind of correction he needs to make. So if he runs with that, it's people else coming out and trying to argue against calling him a transphobe or anything like that. It's going to be like trying to defend Emperor Atheist after his homophobic comments, right? And that he stood by.
Yeah. All right. Well, here's what I'd like to do. So one of the things I was saying earlier is I really do think that we need to hear all sides, and I think that there's more for that. I think you've expressed an opinion that I'm really glad you came on and expressed. I think I'd like to sort of move on from the topic, and I'd sort of like to leave it such that you've really had the last word, and I hope that you feel that that's what's been done. He sort of has had the last word in a couple of forums, and I think you've represented a position. I think anything we're going to say here is probably just reiterating positions we've already held.
So to go back to Rationality Rules video, after he mentioned it, I went and I watched it, and I've been really passionate about LGBT rights, and I do pride marches. I go out. I lobby on behalf of people when it comes to things in legislature that have to do with homosexuality or transgenderism. And but one question kept popping into my head, and I can't figure out for the life of me like why it's transphobic to discuss whether or not trans women have an advantage over cis women in sports as far as athleticism goes. And I understand like the political correctness of it, but I just don't understand how that is in any way transphobic.
Well, let's have that discussion, because I would like to have that discussion, and that actually goes right back into the argument we were having with Odinson. I would like to try to keep it off of the specific situation with Rationality Rules, and I'd sort of like to, and if I'd like to give Red the last word, because he's actually gotten a position that I am opposed to, but I'm hoping that he feels like he's already had it, and we're gonna go into this. But if he has another minute that he'd like to use to sort of to address that.
Okay, great. Well, then we can all get band together. That's awesome.
Can I just say something real quick before Red goes? Yeah, because I wanted to ask the question, and kind of Jim already asked it. So, was it that there was inelegant, eloquent, or offensive language within that video, or was he just dead wrong, Red, to even ask that question? Because in my mind, I think the same way Jim does, is that I don't know the answer because I'm not an expert. Is there some question to be asked about trans women against cis women in sports?
Let Nick throw out his input, Red, before you answer, if you don't mind, just so that you're addressing all of them.
And let's do it, and let's you can address it about specifically what I'm going to bring up, and we can do it through that lens, because so one of the things that I had mentioned, and I mentioned this before, and I try to be very careful about it, but so a lot of people are talking about cis versus trans women in sports, and I've seen a lot of arguments that there's absolutely no advantage gained if you are a fully trans woman, if you've gone through the full thing, and I first of all, that may well be the case. I don't know, and I think anybody who at least brings up the question, and to bring up the question, and this is what we were talking about earlier, as soon as you bring up the questions like, is that really true? That doesn't make sense to me. Now, there are plenty of things that don't make sense to me that are dead wrong. And, we look at the sun. The sun operates counterintuitively. It looks like it's the sun that's moving. It's not. It's us. So there are plenty of things that in my mind are completely counterintuitive and I'm dead wrong about. So that's fine. I'm okay being wrong, but I'm not okay not being able to ask the question without being called a transphobe just for recognizing recognizing the question.
Exactly.
And here are my concerns, which while I understand that the hormone therapy does change a lot, it cannot change everything. And there seems to be, the second you say that, there seems to be this, oh my God, you're transphobic. No, I'm acknowledging something and explaining to you why I say, are you sure that they can compete? And I remember one of the saddest things I ever saw. Affirmative action is one I struggle with because I understand why, and I understand that it actually does work, but it also does really engender a lot of hostility in ways that you don't want to be engendering. And I remember seeing an ad for affirmative action, and there was a black woman who had just learned she had gotten accepted into college, and she was going to be a vet. And she was thrilled that she was going to be a vet. This was her life dream coming true. She was going to be a vet, and it was because of affirmative action. If it was because of affirmative action, that necessarily entails that there was somebody else who was white, who may have very well had the dream just as much, who isn't getting in. And that's not to say it's necessarily wrong, but it is to say that's being ignored. And if you're going to do an emotional video about, so there are female athletes who are competing against there are sexed female, there's cis female athletes competing against athletes that are transgender, and there is a possibility, and I think at least a 50-50, that they may have in some sports, maybe not in others, I don't know, but just to ask, how likely is it that they have a significant advantage? And I've been asked to produce studies, and I've looked, there aren't many, but there are a few. Some found not a significant advantage, others found in some cases an advantage. And for just saying that,
Sure.
I am a transphobe, and I have a problem with that.
Well, I mean, just for identifying, people, like, for instance, you had the trans woman who was a wrestler, and she crushed some woman's record. She had a 52-0 record, and she just totally defeated her. I think she was like a junior or senior in high school, and it was Texas girls wrestling.
I remember that. I saw that.
So you're talking about the Mac Begg situation, where it's a trans man.
We have powerlifters breaking records.
Hold on, let's go back to that. That's That's the Mac Begg situation. That's a trans man being denied access to men's sports, or a trans boy, because of Texas state decision to say you have to wrestle in the category that you're born in. So you're born female, you got to wrestle the females, even if you're a trans guy, right? So that's the Mac Begg situation. That's not what anybody on this side is arguing for. All right, that's the stupidity of the Texas sports putting them in that situation.
So what about my question then? So I really had two questions, which is, one, is it okay to ask these questions? And if it is, why, when somebody asks, do we get labeled all sorts of terrible things, including Nazi? And if it is, why do we have so much difficulty asking? If it's not, why is it not?
Right.
And then once we answer that question, is the second question, how realistic is there a possibility that at a minimum in some sports there is an unfair advantage?
Right, and there is an advantage because there's, like you said in the beginning, there are some things that hormones can't change. For example, men on average have more muscle mass than women, and a larger part of that muscle mass
with hormones. That's testosterone.
And a larger part of that is fast twitch, which does not change with testosterone, especially if it's already been developed. It allows them to take off faster, to build more force, and to a higher O2 capacity, or a higher VO2 capacity. Higher aerobic capacity. So I mean, that helps them with their lungs and with their breathing, more hemoglobin. There's a lot of things that don't change.
Thing was debunked as well.
Great.
So let's let EOT video. Links right to the study.
All right, hold on.
An Ohio biologist.
Hold on. We've been talking a lot.
All right.
We've been really quiet and silent. So let's let him, because I asked him questions that I want genuine answers to. So, and I know he's ready to do it. So I'm thrilled.
All right. Well, so I think you got to quit comparing someone like Shadow Wolf on Twitter, because I know that's who you're referring to, and the way she argues, it's ridiculous.
Nope, never heard of Shadow Wolf.
Well, that's who Nicholas
I think he may mean other people
with the
in
ads
this
guy
chat are referring to that. But all right,
that are similar to that. But the recognizing the differences, and then that something doesn't always change. That's, you know, in the big debunk video of Rationality Rules, Essence of Thought agrees with that, right? But it's, you know, it's not bringing up the thing. The transphobic bit that everybody has an issue with Rationality Rules is that for supposedly researching to back up his argument in this video.
Well, hold on. Hold on. I really want answers to the questions I just asked. I want to stay off of Rationality Rules because that is an entire show, and I honestly have no problem. I have no problem sitting down and really discussing that. But we are discussing something different here, which is part of that topic. But the specifics of what happened in that video isn't and you brought up some really good things for us to think about, which I appreciate. But I'd like to now go on to this topic, which may again be ancillary, but what he said or did, I really would rather not discuss now. I did ask two questions.
This is trying to answer your question. It's getting to the point of the difference between having these questions and what Rationality Rules did with the video.
Yeah,
right?
I don't care what he did. The second you bring him up,
no. The questions aren't something to have an issue with, because there's several people who have called out Rationality Rules on this video and stuff who have those same questions in private conversations about it and bring up it, and it comes across. And the initial reaction is, you know, that was my initial thought with it, but I never looked into it. And so bringing up that opinion, bringing up that discussion isn't an issue. It's when you say you do the research, but you don't do it, and it's not there. You know what I mean? That's where the issue is. It's not necessarily the question. Now, there are some of the fringe ones that are, you know, in any group that are all, no, you can't even do that stuff. But I think you're equating some of the fringe aspects with what the general disagreement is.
Well, and that's a danger, and I want to try to avoid it. And I said at the beginning, it can be difficult to understand what's just on Twitter, because you can't assume that Twitter is a microcosm for everything. Twitter can be a fetting cesspool of, you know, hate and vitriol. So just because you see it on Twitter doesn't mean. And admittedly, that there are elements, but Steve McRae got into, you may have heard of him, got into. Nobody laughs at my jokes anymore. I'm not pretty again.
I will laugh at your jokes if I can get the word in eventually.
All right,
Nick, I laughed, but I was muted. Sorry.
All right, perfect. So Steve got into serious shit discussing this with what I thought at the time. I haven't looked into their backgrounds, but struck me as credible members of the community, not fringe elements. And he said similar shit, and people I actually like and respect landed on him like a ton of fucking bricks for asking roughly these same questions. Now, I understand everybody landing on Steve like a ton of bricks is like a hobby for most people, and so I get that, but this struck me as really rather personal. But yeah, Reds, what did you want to say?
Well, yeah, actually, it was more to go towards something that you probably didn't want to talk about. And it was going back to Rationality Rules, but also to second what you say, a lot of people were supporting Essence of Thought in his original video, but seeing how he was treating Steve McRae by calling him an actual Nazi lover, fuck that guy in the ear sideways. Just throwing that out there right now.
Can I ask you a question, Reds?
Sure, but let me finish my thought first, and then I'll answer the question. So, but basically, you can go ahead and look at Rationality Rules' video in a couple ways. You can view it as him failing to get the science done, as some sort of bias as to make it seem like they shouldn't compete in sports. But you can also look at it in the context of him saying over and over and over again, I am not denying your humanity. I think they should be respected. I think they should be accepted. I am in full support of trans women and stuff like that. Basically, he had a lot of clarifying statements in that video to show that actually, no, he doesn't have a bias against these people. He's just asking the question. And similarly, what's been happening on Twitter, now I've been charged with this, apparently being a Nazi lover and shit like that, for asking these same exact questions. And that's because I don't know the science. I am genuinely curious. Is there an actual advantage to being trans as opposed to being cisgendered? I would like to know these questions. And then when I ask these questions outright, now all of a sudden I get called a Nazi lover. I'm being called a Nazi lover. That makes no sense to me.
And I actually know some of the answers to those questions, but the reason I know is because I got so shit hammered by so many people, I ended up having to do the research myself. And it really would have been nice if somebody could have explained it to me instead of calling a Nazi. So, for example, yes, the hormones actually reduce muscle mass significantly. There are some caveats to that, but it reduces it almost to. But the study that I saw, and I looked at a number of studies, the one that I saw was in the British Journal of Medicine. And what they said was that even with that reduction, after 5 years, I forget how they put it, but it was really interesting. Something to the effect of a cis female was, oh God, no, but they suggested quite strongly that there was still a significant enough difference to be noticeable.
Well, the problem is because while the mass is reduced, the ratio in fast muscle fibers or fast twitch muscle fibers to slow twitch muscle fibers are still the same as they were before, and males have a higher ratio of that.
So
mass.
And Jim, just to kind of get back to you, what questions did you want to ask me?
Oh yeah, okay. So okay, so you I brought up Mac, and I brought up the wrestling there. So do you feel like it is unfair for people to engage in competitive sports while still undergoing hormone therapy, one way or the other?
Well, that's the thing. I do not. My shtick here on YouTube is bashing flat earthers and how they get that science wrong. I'm more interested in space, astronomy, rockets, and stuff like that. When it comes to biology, I don't have a fucking clue.
Well, not so much biology, but sociology.
Well, even that. Well, that's why I'm asking the question. I'm asking the question to learn as much as I can about the topic because I am ignorant. See, when I'm ignorant about a subject, I come right out with it. But I also want to make it. I also want to make it clear that just because I asked the question, I don't have this, underlying scheme to try and keep trans people down. Absolutely not. That's fucking absurd.
Well, that's true because here's the thing: people ask questions. Usually because they don't know the answer. I mean, and I think that a lot of times people think that when someone asks a question, they have some hidden agenda behind that question, and that's the minority of cases.
I think that's a great point, and I'm really glad you made it, and I want to follow up on that. I was going to say something similar to that, but we seem to have a very special guest who has come in. He heard that Jim wanted to marry me. He heard that Steve has been competing for me, and so
Kyle?
He came in explicitly to compete for my attention, is what I've been told. Whether or not that's true,
I didn't come in. Hang on, whoa! I did not come in to explicitly compete for your attention. Okay, what the fuck are you on?
I'm talking about Kyle, not you.
Oh! I knew it was Kyle.
Oh, he thought the special guest. Good for him. Yeah.
Well,
Kyle, special a guest.
Kyle, where is your gorgeous mug?
I'm here for Reds.
Oh, he's here for Reds.
It's
not me.
All right then.
I love you all, but
I'm crushed. I'm crushed.
Jim, I had a question before about hormone therapy.
Okay, Nacho had a question.
The fact is that there are people out there that would gladly swim through an ocean of thumbtacks just to be eclipsed by my shadow. That's what I'm saying.
Is that all it takes?
What is it? I would climb through, or I would crawl through broken glass to suck the dick of the guy that he last fucked.
Wow.
Oh my God.
All right. Well, this was fun, guys.
I've lost control of the chat. I think this is done. Nick is going to tap out. I'm going to raise the white flag. We're talking about.
I'm an atheist.
I really wish
all I can say to
it's beat red right now.
I'm an atheist, and all I can say to that is, oh my God.
Yeah, I know. Well, actually, so there's a lot of the people I know worship the quicksand that Steve walks on. Oh my God. Okay. Well, and nobody got that joke either, but that's all right. So, who was talking last and who wanted to talk last? That's probably a really stupid question.
Jim,
we got 300 hands.
I wanted to, I was thinking of like a possible answer. I don't know as a fact, of course, it was just speculation that you asked about should they be able to compete while they're going through their transition. I'm thinking if they're going through any form of hormone therapy or any sort of drugs in the system in any way, that you'd think would be a no automatically, wouldn't it? Because that's a usual thing in all sports for all competitors.
Right. So, well, you would think that, but in this particular situation, what it was a transgender male who was forced to compete with females, and he was undergoing testosterone therapy. And testosterone really boosts your strength and makes you strong, gives you a huge advantage, especially in sports. As a matter of fact, it's steroids is what it is. That's basically what happened with that.
And that's why I'd suspect that person shouldn't be able to compete.
Well,
not
I wouldn't
for
have a problem
any
with
reason
them
but
competing
that.
with. I wouldn't have a problem with them competing with the gender that they identify with, so long as the trans women were testing at a low enough testosterone to be, to be biologically paralleled with females, and as long as the let me make sure I get this right. As long as the trans male was fighting in with men. That's the only thing that I would add.
Through transitional stages, if they're going through if they're literally doing hormone therapy, they're not going to be at level in any way. You're not going to be able to find parity there between competitors.
Well,
even if they're doing the same transitions, their bodies are going to be different. They're going to be at different stages going through that transition.
Right. You're gonna have a number of problems here anyway, because you get into, okay, let's just talking women's sports in general. There are some women who have a natural, for whatever reason, have actually like almost a supernatural advantage. Some kind of, are they allowed to compete? Right now we say, well, of course they are, and presumably they should. But you're going to have to draw lines at. I understand the argument of a concern of somebody who, for whatever reason, some genetic abnormality, ends up being 10 times stronger or better than anyone else in the field. And what do you do with that? So you end up getting into what's the definition of sports? What's the definition of, the argument about should there be a separate baseball league where they're allowed to take performance enhancing drugs? Because actually, that's really kind of what people want to see.
I mean, why wouldn't you? I mean, we go to watch sports because they're entertained, because they beat the fuck out of each other. Let them take steroids. If it's consensual, let them. I'm all for bringing the gladiators back, baby.
I'm sure I am, but okay. I think the problem with that is
so there's a couple of things on the steroid discussion. There's a couple with that league and stuff. So the arguments against it are bad, and the doping policies in general. There's a whole argument you can get into. The only argument I would accept for banning that kind of stuff is you don't want to incentivize amateur athletes to get into something that's damaging to them, especially when they're young.
Sure. Of course.
So you ban them from that. So you're
I think they'd have to undergo some kind of therapy.
Let's let him finish.
Well, and on to Nach's question, I'm not exactly sure on this exactly, but I'm pretty sure you do that trans hormone therapy, you're on that forever. I mean that's the rest of your life, because you're not producing the hormones. Am I right about that? That'd be something for.
I'm pretty sure that's right. Yeah.
The thing is, whenever a trans woman is transitioning, yes, they usually do have to be on hormones, but they get down to a level low enough and they maintain that level so they don't have the testosterone.
If I recall correctly, it's 5 years before you're considered to have had enough of the muscle mass removed to be enough where they say, okay, you are now officially a.
Right. Well,
you still need maintenance. Yeah.
It's testosterone though. Testosterone is what they go by. It just so happens that the muscle mass goes before the last test goes.
But guys naturally do generate testosterone, and that of course is not considered cheating, because that's
right. What got. But it has to be combated with estrogen to get it down to a low enough level to where I feel like it would be fair for them to compete in competitive sports.
Yeah, right.
All right. But what I was getting at wasn't about any of the muscle mass and stuff. Is that for like the hormone production stuff, and if you transition, my understanding is you're gonna have to be on that hormone treatment, just to get the results that you want for the rest of your life. So if it's the hormone treatment, you can't be on it. But I think the issue with a question like that is that there are cis athletes who are allowed to participate on hormones who have hormone deficiencies, right? Okay. So these are called therapeutic use exemptions, right? And so nobody in any of this argument is arguing against preventing them from taking the hormones they need for those medical treatments and stuff.
I'm going to interrupt you. Stop.
Generally,
No, stop. Nobody here is arguing against the trans either. Keep in mind what I just said in context was, I'm curious if you're taking it for medical reasons, is it cheating? I literally just said that. So the position that I hold is that we should question it and ask it, and that these are the discussions. But the way you just painted it was, oh, well, hey, you're okay with it. I asked about
proposed,
it. So
I apologize for misspeaking on there.
But it's not just because what I want you to understand is, I'm asking this question universally across the board. And first of all, what you heard was, oh, well, he's asking the question there, but if he asks the question with trans, he's considering banning them. And that's how it gets framed.
No, I just wanted to.
Stop. I cut Red off. Stop. I cut Red off. He listened to what I have to say. I want him to finish what he was saying. And then, John, you are absolutely next. But I cut Red off, so he's going to finish.
All right. Yeah, so that's my apologies. I wasn't trying to imply that with a poor word choice on my part. And some other things that I was bringing in argument-wise in the general argument, and what I was trying to get at is most people are, with regards to that question, don't look at the hormone deficient cis athletes as cheating when they're on that stuff there. So I think it's a flaw in the argument if you're going to accept that. I'm not saying you are, but some people are perfectly fine accepting that.
Yep.
Yeah, accept that and then reject it on the trans ground, right?
That's a good point. That's an excellent point. I agree with that point. That makes a lot of sense. Please continue.
All right. Yeah. So that's what I was trying to get at. I don't know where else I was going, but
well, let's let John get in then, because he's been chomping at the bit.
Well, I just had one quick thing that may be apropos of nothing, but certainly
that's what we expect of you, John. That's what, if it made any sense, nope, would be like, where's John?
But not that it was in the ether or in the sphere of discussion as big as it is nowadays. But I was just wondering if anybody knows how long that this has been an issue, that this has been a question, because does anybody, or maybe I'm showing my age here, does anybody remember Dr. Renee Richards?
Oh my gosh, yes.
Professional tennis player. I mean, that was decades ago.
And it was only a problem because she was so damn good.
Well, so tell me, what was the story? I don't know it.
Dr. Renee Richards was a professional tennis player, trans woman. And that was from back in the, I believe, late 70s and 80s.
About the lady from the poster.
But there is one thing that you have to bring up now. So I'm glad that we brought that up, and I'm glad that we're discussing it. But the next thing, of course, is that the technology for becoming trans has changed dramatically. So while I think that's a really good question, you do need to remember she probably wasn't undergoing the same regimen with the same scientific, which it's still a very new thing. That's one reason people are asking these questions. It's a new thing. So we're going to ask these questions. And then people who get asked, especially if they're already really leaning towards or even on the side of, or if they're on the side of, because here's the other thing, it's not all or one. You can object to certain elements of how a certain thing, whether it's the rights of a minority, trans, whatever, you can say, I'm for it, but I'm not sure that it should be done in this way. That doesn't mean you are universally against that, and that's the way it gets painted. So when Steve says something like, here's a question I have, well, gee, he must be against it entirely or scared of it entirely, which is the other, how does it get framed as you're a homophobe?
It gets framed as being a Nazi lover, is the way that Essence of Thought put it, which, by the way, if you call your channel Essence of Thought, you're putting a lot of pressure on yourself, and god damn it, you're not doing a good fucking job at that.
So I would propose a solution to this, and this might sound crazy, and feel free to say it's stupid, but just go co-ed everything and have different leagues. Like, you have a limitless league where you can take whatever the hell you want, as long as you have a psychological evaluation and make sure that you're not abusing the drugs, to a certain extent or whatever, but basically no drug testing is what it boils down to. And then you have, like the pro league, and you have a limit on testosterone. You have a limit on these things that are performance enhancing. You can limit certain drugs. And then you just go down from there and you taper off. And and if you can't compete, then you can't compete. Nobody says that you have the right to compete within a certain league just because you are you are a man, or because you are a woman, or because you are a trans man, or because you're a trans woman. There should be. If we're talking equality, then we need to talk true equality.
Okay, so let me say one quick thing, and then we'll get to the answer to that. But I want to say two quick things. One, that's an excellent point, and nobody has a right to compete, and that is another thing. And I think competition is important. I think parity and being fair is important, but that's fair on both sides, and that's a difficult thing to walk. But I do want to say about drugs, saying it's okay to take, and we're not going to drug test. My only concern with that is it's going to become a game of chicken, where it's who can take the most drugs that's most likely to kill themselves on performance enhancing drugs and survive it. So it ends up being, you're not watching baseball anymore. You're watching, hey, was he able to take enough testosterone that he can, not die and go out onto the field? And that's what we're going to be selecting for.
Right.
So
the baseball example is mad because but
isn't that what you want to see though? Like you want to see somebody,
yes, of course,
on the Cardinals.
Wants to see. I agree.
Can you imagine that though? Seeing somebody on the Cardinals strike out and just walk up to a post and just wrap the bat around it,
That would be pretty badass, but I did get asked a question in live chat that I just want to respond to. So a question was like why are we asking these questions? Why the curiosity? Some of it is curiosity in my case, but it's also because I have legitimate concern. Let's hypothetically say, this is just a hypothetical, that trans women being involved, like let's say sports having to do with fighting, does give them an unfair advantage. I don't want to see people unfairly get the shit kicked out of them every single time they go against that person. That would be pretty fucked up, in my opinion. So some of it is concern. Again, that's only hypothetical. If there is an actual advantage, again, I haven't looked into it as hard as other people. But that's why I asked the question. I want to see, is there actually a danger involved with this? It's not because of transphobia or because I'm a quote Nazi lover. It's because it's a curiosity and a general concern.
And don't ignore that curiosity, because intellectual curiosity is a very important thing. This happens to be a group that usually tends to be intellectually curious. That's why we do what we do when we talk about these things. And but I think you're right, and it's one of the things we said earlier, which is fairness cuts both ways. There's another side and another person who is competing, and I happen to be. I want to be fair for both. I want to treat both equally. That's part of what treating equally means. Yes, Jim.
Right. Well, and and this probably isn't a discussion to have today, but further down the road, but it's definitely something to think about, and it's relevant. Does somebody have the right to hurt themselves if they are in the right psychological state? Does somebody have the right to put themselves at risk doing that? People put themselves at risk for different reasons all the time. Does somebody have a right to go skydiving? There's no purpose behind it, and it's extremely risky. But people do it for the pure rush of it. So why can't people do the same thing with,
Listen, the right whip in the right hands is just. Oh, did I just say that?
Yes, you did.
Okay.
Words are slaves. Is it right?
Yeah. Well, listen, I'm thinking probably about 10 or 15 more minutes. I sometimes say that, and it's going to be another 3 hours, but I'm thinking 10 or 15 more minutes because I'm starting to get a little tired, and we may be sort of getting close to wrapping things up.
Pretty soon you're going to be saying stuff like the right whip with the right gag in the right hand.
Yeah, I was going to say the gag, you're psychic, aren't you? Wow, I'm a little scared and turned on at the same time.
Birds of a feather flock together.
Okay. So, I think these are some really good things. And I don't want to shut it down. I do want to say that I'm really glad everybody's come on all sides of this. I think it's been a marvelous discussion. So I think we covered, oh my God, and we actually stayed reasonably on topic in I think a great way. So I'm so glad everyone showed up.
A few minutes ago you were talking, I think it was Red that brought up the possibility of an unfair advantage, and the opponent losing every time. That's actually been an issue in sports many times, even without the issue of trans. I mean, look at when Mike Tyson first hit the scene as a boxer. I mean, he he was, a genetic freak seemingly, and was kicking everybody's ass, ending fights in the first round.
Yeah, but he eats people. That's unfair. He eats people.
Well, yeah.
But I mean, to continue the fighting thing, look at the top leagues, like the talent disparity amongst people. Just to begin with, you go to some of the lower level professional fights, you want to see someone get their ass beat in and feel uncomfortable about it. That's one of those to go to, and there's that kind of mismatch.
This is gonna get really geeky, and I'm sorry, I didn't want to cut you off. We're gonna.
Oh well, that's not on that point. But the only thing I want to bring up, there's a point Jim brought up earlier about going, just putting them all together, generally and stuff. There is a book out there that argues for that case. It's called "Playing with the Boys." I forget who it's by.
Wait. What's it called?
Playing with the Boys, and I haven't read it. I've seen the interviews, and it came up in researching this particular topic. Finding stuff there. But so it was something ancillary that came up, and their argument is that girls aren't treated the same training wise, get the same kind of training that the boys do from a young age, so that puts them behind. I don't know how much I buy it, but there's an argument put out there, and they cite some data, but all I've seen is interviews. So that's a book to look into if you want to see that argument.
I went ahead and looked up Playing with the Boys, and I had to delete my internet history.
Wait, so you can't copy the link? Oh, look it up again and send me in the private chat. Will be good.
For research, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a professional. This is what I do.
www.por.
Oh boy.
So I'm going to get really wonky here for a second, and there's probably a much easier way to explain it than the way I'm about to get into. But so first of all, because I'm a writer, the word as metaphor becomes very important. And how do we categorize and classify things? Interesting aspect of phenomenon. There seems to be an infinite aspect of phenomenon to reality. Wow. Okay. I'm getting a little tired. One interesting aspect is, of course, that really sort of in a relativistic view, there's an infinite number of combinations of things, and we categorize things and use words and break things up into categories because we have to find a way to formalize and to categorize and break things down into digestible chunks. It doesn't mean things belong in those chunks. A rainbow has an infinite number of colors. It has an infinite number of colors, but we don't sit there and say it's got an infinite number of colors. You could never possibly operate. So we say it's got 7, 8, however many we say it does. It doesn't have that many. It's an infinite number. So there are an infinite number, and now I really is unnecessarily wonky. It's the difference between sort of a quantum view of the universe where everything has discrete, specific positions and can't be anywhere else, versus a relativistic view, which is that everything's infinitely divisible and who knows. For the most part, everything seems to be infinitely divisible, but our brains can't wrap around that, so we break things up into categories. And what we're talking about here is, what does it mean to be fair? There is no answer. It is what we decide, right. And we break things up into these categories, into these groups, and where we say, okay, we should do it by women and men. That's fair. Boom. It's not fair for the same reasons that Red just mentioned and that we had talked about earlier, which is what do you get when you have a woman who accidentally took Sudafed because or took some cold medicine? There was the who was it, the tennis player who got disqualified because she legit took Sudafed, and did it really give her an advantage? We don't know, but it could have. I don't know. Sudafed puts me to sleep. But and so what about people who are legit on hormone therapies that they need to live? Do they get to compete? Do they not? Do they have a right? Do they not? And when we talk about these questions, well, I was going to bring that up, but you get up into a whole other host of problems with that. But my point being that, especially when, and maybe there are some people who are bringing this up exclusively in regards to transgender, but these are all questions that need to be asked almost all the time. And the gender is just the latest front on that. It's the bleeding edge of where people are asking these questions. But we've been asking questions like this for a while. It's just that when you ask it about this particular topic, all of a sudden your motives are questioned immediately. And I appreciate the guy who gave that live chat who said, why ask? When have we stopped When have we stopped? It's just that now we're asking it about the latest bleeding edge. This is where things are coming in. But we've always been asking these questions, and we have to, because there is no set answer other than that what we make for ourselves. And so we have to say, what does it mean to be fair? And how we're going to, and there's going to be no answer. No, but there's going to be no answer that people are going to agree on.
When I was sitting here trying to think about the leagues and like how I would divide the leagues up, I knew that I would make a limitless one where people could take whatever they wanted. And then after that, I got started to think about classification. It's like, well, if there's no sex classification, then how are we going to classify this? What do we measure? Do we measure their strength? Do we measure how much they can bench? Do we measure how fast they are? Like you said, at some point we are segregating. At some point
you have to.
At some point we are setting parameters that you have to operate within in order to qualify.
You have to, and they will never be completely fair. It cannot be done. And there is at some point where trying to make it completely fair, you can get a drill, get a good drill bit, start drilling it into your skull, and you're going to be about as productive at some point. And that's unfortunate, but that's the way it is. So the question is, how and where do we draw these lines? And that's what the discussion is. But right now, when some people ask these questions, even if they are on the side of the trans, and but they're asking the question in the context of sports, which strikes me as a really fair question, especially if you haven't studied it, which guess what, not everybody has, and it's easier to ask.
I haven't much.
Yeah, it's easier to ask someone who presumably is an expert because it's an issue they care about. And instead, when you get shot down, and I think Red made a really good point, which is sometimes it's really just the lunatics who do that, but sometimes it isn't. And I don't think it was in Steve's case. It may have been in mine and the one that, or maybe, I don't know. I don't know the people involved. I do know this isn't the first time it's happened. I know it's happened with me on other issues, which is why also when we first started talking about this, we were going to maybe just talk about trans, and I wanted to, and I'm happy with the time we've spent on it. We can continue spending time on it, but we actually talked about other kinds of SJW and the pink tax, and we talked about other things because I think it's important. But I think someone else is going to speak, and I've been going on, so it looked like Red maybe wanted to say something. I don't know.
Yeah, well, it's more of the thing like you
just speak up, sorry.
I just want to make sure that it's just stated. I went ahead and fired back at Essence of Thought, and I wanted him to basically back up his assertions. I want to see where he's coming from.
The assertion, the allegations against Steve.
Yeah, the allegations against Steve. Well, not just against Steve, against anyone who asks these questions. Because it strikes me as odd that you can make these allegations, even though they said over and over and over again, I support trans people. I support them. I am on their side. How many fucking times do I have to say the exact same thing, only for you guys to just ignore it at the end of the day? It strikes me as intellectually dishonest.
Can I weigh on that? Right.
Go ahead.
Okay. The thing that I've noticed is that when we've run into these problems before, when especially when it comes to this, and I'm sorry, but it is regressive SJW. What happens is there is no appeasing them, right? You can go out of your way to capitulate. You can be contrite. You can commit Harry Carey, and they wouldn't care. Live on camera, it doesn't matter. There's nothing you could do to ever satisfy, to quell their quench for blood. I told Rationality Rules this. Other people told Rationality Rules this. I think he did a great video in response. He took it on board. But when it comes to these people that just want to be professional, moral outragers and just persecution porn advocates because they get off on it, I don't really want to deal with them. I keep them around only because that I think that they should be exposed. I think EOT should be exposed. I think he's doing more damage to the trans and gay communities than any legitimate homophobe or transphobe there is. There's no question about it, because he's denigrating these words to mean nothing anymore. He's using them as an argumentative tool in the form of negative rhetoric rather than what they should be used for, which is to point out to somebody who actually feels these ways against these groups and has some kind of bias against them and uses them to cause harm to these groups. There are actual homophobes out there. There are actual transphobes out there. But just recently, EOT posted a private conversation between him and Rationality Rules, which one thing I avoid doing at all cost. But he posted a private conversation, and at the very end of it, Rationality Rules was asking him, do you want me in my video to refer to you as Ethel or what's the other thing? What's his the male thing that he goes by? I don't remember.
Peter.
I'll say Robert. I don't remember. Peter, thank you. Peter Ethel. And Caitlin Chloe noticed this, and she rightly noted, if Rationality Rules was transphobic, why would he be considerate of what to refer to him in his next video? That is not the action. Yeah, that isn't. It's a very good point. She noticed.
No, that's not.
I wish I would have caught it. Yeah, she did. Very good point. Because it's not consistent with what we would see from somebody who actually is homophobic. It is incongruent, and for EOT to make every little issue, no matter what Rationality does at this point, it'll never satisfy him.
Well, that's something you can't fake. That's the verisimilitude. You can't fake that. Yep.
Well,
I just want to throw that out there. Thank you.
Well, that's why I was actually making the point, because it actually led to a question that I was going to ask the entire group. When I ask these questions and they decide to basically throw sand in my face because I had the audacity to ask these questions because I genuinely want to know, do I have the right at that point to basically slam their shit right back up their ass, but only sideways?
Well, if you told you otherwise, you'd still do it. So what the hell?
Yes, what are you asking? Do we have any control
over that? Yeah,
that sounds hot, Reds.
I'm just saying because
yeah, the Friday night or Saturday night you're doing this. Wait,
you know what? 7 days a week, my darling. 7 days a week.
It's a different direction based on the night. He uses different.
Exactly. Sometimes we're at 45 degrees. Sometimes we're at 90. It depends on.
Yeah, the whole sideways things is what should cause issue, though.
Yeah,
my point being here is this: my point here is that it strikes me as odd that these guys are acting like, for example, Essence, I thought was genuinely acting surprised that he was getting such blowback from this, from having called Steve and myself and other people a Nazi or Nazi lovers or whatever the case may be. He was actually genuinely surprised. And this is why I wanted to call him out. I'm like, okay, well, you've obviously made this assertion. Here is your chance to back it up. Oh, you don't want to go on the Non Sequitur show? Well, how about this? You have a channel with 30,000 subs. I also have a channel with 30,000 subs. Come onto my channel and discuss it there. I'll moderate. As a person who legitimately doesn't have a fucking clue about the subject, I am more than happy to just keep the conversation going. That's it.
He won't do live stuff. He even said he won't do live stuff.
And that basically says a lot about him. It really does.
Yeah, I mean, he can't think on his feet with these types of positions.
Well,
these types of arguments.
Well, I'm not necessarily as convinced. Some people I've met, and I have some good friends who refuse to do live stuff, and they've got.
Oh yeah, I'm not saying in general. I'm saying with him.
Yeah,
it's specific with him, not in general.
Well, and Red's said one second, then I'll have you go. So, but Reds had said something that was really interesting. It was like, well, I said 100 times I'm not transphobe, so and that I support this group. So what do they think? And that's the problem. Every time you say it, if they've already made up your mind, every time you say it, what's happening is
would say.
Well, exactly, but exactly. But so Steve's was perfect though. Steve's was perfect because what Steve did was or Caitlin pointed this out, which is, hey, wait a minute. There has to be a genuine meeting of the minds. If the question even occurred to him, how do you want to be called? Just to say that, just to think that, you cannot fake that. Somebody who has an issue isn't going to have that courtesy. I'm sorry, Steve, I cut you off.
Yeah, no, that's fine. It's just nothing.
I call bullshit on that.
Oh, really?
How can you call bullshit on that?
I really.
So I'm not saying specifically in Steven's case that it means that.
I'll actually defend Rationality Rules on this one.
But I'm coming in. No, I'm just in a general position and stuff there. I mean, there a whole lot of politics is to speak nice and try to cover up bad views. I mean, so suggest, he thought to ask this or that, and
Red, what do you think is transphobic then?
If it's a bullshit argument.
What? If somebody is actually legitimately asking a question to be concerned about how they refer to somebody in a video, and you consider that be transphobic or not good enough, what do you want?
I didn't say that was transphobic. I'm saying it doesn't make them not transphobic.
What do you think is transphobic? Give us your understanding of that word transphobic, please.
That's a good question.
It'd be this. Yeah. Well, my understanding would be the irrational treatment of the trans people, bias, prejudice, all that stuff that goes with like homophobia and all the same stuff that you put in there. All right. But to say that my contention isn't that him asking that makes him transphobic or asking, hey, how do I refer to you? It's but that doesn't mean that he's not transphobic either. In that decision, because
it's incongruent with the hypothesis that he is. Okay, so who in here do you think?
Okay, wait. So just a quick thing, Red. So first of all, I think you have a legit point, and I do see it, which is people can be trained, and I've met people who I know for a fact, and they've told me that they are racist and proud of it, and who hide it really well.
Who's the BNP leader for the
longest time? But you've got to take each case individually. We're talking about rationality rules. Wait, I'm going to finish.
That's why he started.
Hang on, let me finish.
Let him finish.
You're talking about somebody who has an established credibility with the community. You're talking about somebody who has no history of this whatsoever. You're talking about somebody who just the day before gave the ACA the highest goddamn rating that they ever fucking had. It's not like it's somebody who's had a history of these things where you have to question, well, are they, or maybe not. There was no reason for it. There was nothing about him whatsoever that is transphobic.
I consider him an ally.
Well, and
damn right he's an ally.
And listen to what you said, Red, because this is really interesting. When asked what is a transphobe, because that actually has a pretty good definition, but what you said was an irrational dislike of, and so on and so forth. So first of all, just by saying irrational, that's actually phenomenally hard to define. And what the accusation usually is, well, you're being irrational because studies don't do this, or because I don't think you're being rational, because the rational side is to just agree that, you know, we sort of by fiat have a chance, are able to compete because we've been declared medically female for whatever reason. So rationality, what you're really saying, it sounds like, is whatever you or the person thinks is rational, and that is so unbelievably subjective, aside from the fact that that's not really the definition. Transphobe is a very specific thing, and that's why people get called transphobe or racist or homophobic, despite the fact that even if they have a disagreement, and even an irrational one, by the way, which I don't think these are, but it happens, doesn't mean that they are homophobic, transphobic, or any of those things. But the second you call them a loaded word like that, you've got a very serious problem with
you also cut down the conversation. And by the way, I do understand what Reg is saying. He's saying that it's bad evidence. I disagree with him. I think it's good evidence. I think it's incongruent with what we have established from somebody like Rationality Rules. Okay, so it is good evidence against the hypothesis that he is transphobic. But I wanted to know, Reg, who else do you think is transphobic, if I can ask? I've been called transphobic. Do you think I am?
There's a scale.
I don't know. No. This is binary. I don't want a scale.
Okay.
It's a binary yes or no question.
Transphobic. That's
if you even have to posit it, Red, then I got to tell you something is fundamentally wrong with your system of what you think.
Something here.
Transphobic. You even have to even think about that question.
I just want to try something here. Well, here's the thing. I do agree that just because it is a possibility that someone could be trained to give a very convincing bullshit story to make it seem like they're not transphobic. Sure, that is a possibility. However, I look at the fact that he would have to pull one hell of a stunt over the countless years even that he's been on this platform. He would have to continuously reaffirm that bullshit story over and over and over and over again. And I gotta say, the amount of work that he would have to put into making this bullshit story stick, I find that very hard to believe. So while it is not a definite that he is not transphobic, I'm going to say it's more likely, and we should treat it as such until evidence presented that accurately says that this guy is a fucking bigot.
Yeah, well, and you think you're getting ganged up on, and yet you're literally telling people that you're thinking they're transphobic, which is a highly inflammatory word. And you're bitching that you're thinking you're being ganged up on. This is what I'm talking about, persecution porn. This is what I'm talking about. The persecution is not you, Red Venture. It is you are persecuting us. You are persecuting us and trying to label us things that we're not.
Hold up. Let's let Kyle. I think Kyle wants to say something. Let's let
Kyle. I guess Kyle's a homophobe too, right?
I'm just going to say something very quick. There is no scale with transphobia, homophobia, or racism. It's either you are or you are not.
And then if you are, to what degree you are?
It's a binary state. It is absolutely irrefutably a binary state, which gets back to, I'm not sure you understand the word if you say there's a scale. And the problem is it gets thrown out as it's okay to call someone transphobe or homophobe equal to Jerry Falwell, that's what you're saying, and there may be a scale
That's
once
what people hear. Yes.
That's not what
it may
I'm
not
saying.
be. No, it may not be what you mean.
You can't
so it's not.
It may not be what you mean. It's what you're saying.
You cannot use the same word to describe somebody like Rationality Rules as you would Matt Powell. You cannot use that same word describing them equally.
Yes,
it loses all luster to that word.
Atheist situation. I think these are more comparable, right? In what you're arguing against for him being homophobic. Now, Emperor Atheist's bullshit, position and opinion is nothing the same as going to,
yes, exactly.
Killing a gay person or anything like that. But that still makes it.
I think we all agreed that what Emperor Atheist said was beyond the pale. There was a consensus there because it was so egregious. There wasn't even really anybody had to think about that. What he said
I made a video about
clearly bigoted.
When you start saying you can't have your kids around gay men, that is that is
and
homophobic.
He's had a history of it. So there's no benefit of the doubt for somebody and the people that may know some of the backstory on some of the stuff and private stuff. He's had a history of this. So it wasn't like we had to think about it and go, is this guy really bigoted? No, he is bigoted on this. I guarantee it. I know, I've talked to him. And so as many other people.
So what was it? Let's let him talk. Let's let Red talk. So what were you going to say, Red? Because thank you. You've been letting us.
Which Red?
All right.
Which Red?
So what I'm trying to get at, and what I think is being missed, is that Steven's original video was transphobic. There's no other way around it.
Well, there is. Don't say that.
Let him finish. Let him finish.
I mean, I just may agree with that. I don't.
No,
defer to
I don't.
her.
I don't agree with that being it's wrong, and there's turfy lies in that. I'm gonna say that, but I don't believe that Rationality Rules has any malice. I don't think that he's bigoted or anything, and that means he's, as far as I'm concerned, not transphobic. It's an intentional thing, as far as I'm concerned. Right?
I'm not far off with you guys on Rationality Rules thing, right? I mean, if he doesn't fix what obviously was wrong and keeps going at it, it'd be, I think you can be justified in calling him transphobic at that point.
I don't think so.
Rectify.
I don't think
even he admitted.
But my point is,
there were issues.
Generally, I think I agree with you.
There are definitely issues.
Good actor, fair actor, and it's when I'm talking about the scale, it's not, you might say something that's transphobic or racist or anything like that, and generally your character's not all that, right? And so tends where I look at, say, Rationality Rule.
Well, it's not just generally your character's not that. First of all, people say things that other people don't understand or take out of context, whether it's deliberate or not. But yeah, I mean, you can ask genuine questions, and you seem to agree that the questions that I was asking were okay, and you understood that. Despite, again, I got into it today, and you said, okay, that was an outlier. Maybe that hasn't been my experience, and to the best of my knowledge, I don't, I haven't, didn't have access to internet, so I wasn't stalking Steve's timeline and printing it all out and reading it like I normally do. But to the best of my understanding, the argument that Steve got into was asking the same question, and that wasn't. So if it's okay with me, it's got to be okay with Steve. But he got all this shit from mainstream people. This wasn't psychos doing this.
Well, and one thing, we did offer EA to come in and talk about it. He actually said he was going to come in and talk about it, and then he countered out. So there's definitely that's me indicative of somebody who's not going to defend their position. However, I had said something on Twitter about my stance in biology is that there are comedic sexes. There's two biological sexes, male and female, but there's many different types of genders, and I'm not convinced whether it's a discrete or indiscrete spectrum or neither. There could be no spectrum whatsoever. I talked to a doctor on this just recently. She was advocating the position that gender has multiple different things that can be expressed, but it's not exactly a spectrum, either a discrete or not or indiscrete. And she made a very valid case for this. So I'm moving away from a gender spectrum. But there are only two biological sexes, right? Just like Gart has agreed to this. May has said this is her stance as well.
My wife has a PhD in biochemistry, and I showed her what you said, and she agreed with you.
And the Claire from the author of the Two Sexes or the New Sexes in Nature magazine has said the same thing. These are something that is very common that is said, and yet people are being booted from groups for saying these things. If you can't even start the basics, then you cannot have an adult conversation about these things. And to say that I'm transphobic for saying it, then May would have to be transphobic. Cy Gart would have to be transphobic. Nick's wife would have to be transphobic.
Bullshit argument.
I actually want to clarify that.
Let's let May talk, and then let's let Red respond.
I do want to clarify that I'm very much about there being only two sexes, but that's an entirely different thing. But yes, like as far as being biologically male, yes, I am, but there's also there's a lot going on, and
it's complicated.
As I continue to be on hormone replacement therapy, I am becoming less and less biologically male. I think that actually someone who's been on the Non Sequitur show, Florin Bailey, who is a biology student, has actually expressed that she believes that sometime in the future trans people will be considered to be intersex. And there are, I think a lot of people are very much discounting the effects of hormone replacement therapy, because that is responsible for the overwhelming majority of sexual dimorphism, right? It's actually becoming an issue where I am having trouble doing my job currently, because I'm losing physical strength, very much. And I'm actually hurting myself at work on a regular basis, because I still here think I'm as strong as I was, and I'm only almost 5 months in, and it's becoming a thing for me. So I think that I do have the problem that people are just completely discounting hormone replacement therapy. I think that's problematic, but I don't think that the discussion itself is transphobic, and I don't believe that being factually wrong, as people are, is or I don't believe that being factually wrong is being transphobic. Sorry, I'm really tired.
You look like you're ready for bed. Right?
It's almost 2 o'clock in the morning.
And we get that. And these are complex things. I mean, these are very, very in-depth things that somebody needs to go out of their way to really look at the details. It's nothing you're going to pick up overnight. Would you agree, May?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So there's a lot of information. Some of it's good, some of it's bad. There's going to be misinformation. There's going to be things that we get wrong. It's just the way it is. We're not experts in these fields. Neither is Rationality Rules. The point being is when you start throwing around these hyperbolic, inflammatory rhetorical terms like transphobic, you have done nothing to add to the conversation. All you've done is throw out a hand grenade in an already volatile situation, because you're more concerned about labeling somebody a term rather than having the conversation of what the disagreement is about. And I find that to be disingenuous and dishonest, and honestly, the antithesis is what me and my channel stands for.
Let me add to that, because you were bringing up.
Okay, so finish that, and then I do want to give Red a chance to respond, because you've thrown a lot at him.
Okay, that's fair. I'll shut the fuck up.
Okay. So Red, it's yours. Red, you there, Venture?
Right.
I think he's actually someone else, but I've got to interrupt and say one thing. I can now. I couldn't earlier, but I'm going to interrupt and say one thing, which is I'm at a huge disadvantage, because everyone knows everybody else's online persona, and sometimes I just see the name and I don't know who everyone is yet. So it's it turns out that oh yeah, we've been really great friends on Twitter, and that was your real name, and I was treating you like a schmuck because I didn't.
I do that with Not Your Witness all the time. I forget who he is every day. But I go out of my way to do so.
So Red Venture, you are up.
All right. So what I want to say is the people that are calling that video transphobic aren't doing it because he was factually wrong. They're talking about the fear-mongering stuff at the end. If you want to go see Godless Cranium tweeted with a quote of the exact things that seem to be at the heart of the issue, the disagreement within that video. As for the other stuff Steve was trying to bring up and pin to me as, to what my argument supposedly was, it wasn't. I understood your dramatic sex argument in that whole discussion. I followed it along. It was a stupid argument. Kind of had the point of the question or what was going on.
Was it incorrect?
With this discussion and trying to hold
was it incorrect?
No.
Okay. So it's how could it be a stupid argument?
Let's let him finish, and then Steve will.
It was irrelevant.
Well, actually, I want to respond after that.
Yeah, you go next.
To the broader discussion, right? To whether trans women should compete in women's sport and stuff that was being had, right? Now, I don't think you're a bad guy in that sense and all that other stuff, all right? I like Steve, all right? But there was the way that you argued in, this is a while ago, I'll have to go pull the tweets and do all that stuff if you want something bigger, but the way you went about arguing about it, it's very easy to read transphobia in that thing. Now,
that may be true, but have you actually seen how he argues anybody on Twitter? Because it seems to me he was arguing the same way.
Well, Red's running. Let me say something before Red's go real quick. Just 1 sec.
Okay.
Don't read into anything that I write that I don't write, because this is what annoys the shit out of me. You just said what I wrote was correct. Anything you perceived after that is on you, not me. Because all people do. No, let me finish. All you do, or people like you that rather find outrage, is instead of looking at what is being said, because everything I said was scientifically correct, backed up by numerous PhDs that had literally had said, yes, Steve is right on this. And yet you find outrage from it. There was nothing that I said was outrage. And the reason why I was bringing it up is because people have been actually removed from groups for saying exactly what I have said, by people saying that is transphobic to say what you said, even though it's a biological, categorical, unequivocal fact. If you accept biological standards, that is. Now, May makes a good point. May says maybe in the future things might change in some way. That may be the case, right? That's a valid argument to be had. That is not how it is right now.
Okay, so why are you tying what I'm trying to argue to that dramatic sex argument when what I'm talking about has nothing to do with that?
Because you're labeling me transphobic. You're trying to make it out to seem like I'm transphobic.
I'm not saying that was Steve.
Transphobic.
Well,
no, that's not. I'm not saying
that is exactly
that discussion, Steve. No, that's not. Oh my God, there's a lot of stuff you want.
That's what I heard too.
Later, I'll go grab all the tweets and lay out my case for you. All right, in this discussion, I'm talking about something different from what you're trying to hang on to. And then you're trying to pin something else, disagreement.
Well, you got to answer the question. Am I transphobic? Yes or no?
No.
I want him to
Generally,
answer.
I don't think that.
No, I don't want any fucking qualifiers. Just answer the goddamn question. Be a man. I'm not going to kick you out. Am I transphobic? Yes or no?
I don't think so, but it's. I mean,
that's not. I don't want to hear what you don't think. I want to hear what you think. Do you think I'm transphobic? Yes or no?
I don't.
It does.
Just
so no. You. Okay, so no, you don't think that.
I think there's.
Okay.
I think you've said some stuff that's transphobic.
Yeah, just like Rationality Rules said some things that were apparently transphobic, but that's actually one of the things I wanted to point out to. So please let me just get this out. You said that towards the end of Rationality Rules video, there was some fear mongering. You called it fear mongering. Being genuinely concerned and playing clips of others sharing similar concerns is not fear mongering. One of the last clips was of Joe Rogan saying, "Look at my fists, look at my body. Me changing my sex and beating the living shit out of women would be fucked up." Now, here's the thing. The jury's still out on whether or not there's an advantage or not. We'll go ahead and say that. And that's legitimately where I am right now. Jury's still out. But what he was trying to illustrate was that there is a genuine concern about this, and that the genuine concern spreads far and wide, well beyond himself. That's the point that he was making. So how the actual fuck is that fear mongering?
Could that so I can see how it's not fear mongering, but could that be perceived as propaganda?
No. The only thing in Rationality Rules video that I would have not have in there was the part where it says like it's a man.
I can see it. in the same way, look, if you're looking for a fight, you can find a fight in it quite easily. You can say, okay, he's fear mongering. But that's part of what we're talking about is people who are genuinely looking for a fight and trying to find a way. They've already made up your mind that asking the question is, and then boom, they hit you with that. Was Kyle going to say something, or is that just his mic?
I just wanted to make sure I got an answer to that question. I am basically on this where it's like, the only thing I saw Rationality Rules do was illustrate his concern and then show other people also illustrating their concern. You didn't see him play any clips that said that trans people should not be accepted or we should deny their humanity or anything like that. It was just addressing a concern that people were going to get the shit quite literally kicked out of them, and that would be unfair. Now, again, he could be wrong about the science. That's perfectly fine. But what right do we have to try to suggest that there was some evil intention behind playing those clips?
Right. Well, and to go one step further, I have said racist things. I am not proud of it. With good friends, I get corrected, and I was like, I can't fucking believe I said that. I have said stupid things. I am not stupid. I have said stupid things. I have been a jerk sometimes. Doesn't mean I am a jerk. So, and we've all said, okay, you're being a jerk. Like, you just call me a jerk. No, you are being one doesn't mean you are one. There is a huge difference. And if somebody says something that is transphobic, and I've seen people say, okay, that's transphobic, what you just said, without actually attacking the person, that's different. And I've seen actually people do that with Stephen. He's much more responsive to that. I'm more responsive to that, where they say, look, what you just said is, and here's a reason why, because I have said stupid things without being stupid. I have said racist things without being racist. And I try to fix them, and I work on them, and that's what makes us a better human being. But there's a difference. And when you sit there and say, okay, because he said it, and you had said earlier, okay, he said things that were transphobic. If that's the case, and I'm not convinced that it is, but if that is, that's a very different claim than going out and saying he is transphobic because of. The two hugely different claims, and it's too quick to jump from the first position to the second.
Hey, Nick Macabre is asking in the internal chat if Macabre is asking to get in.
Thanks very much.
I just wanted to point out that I don't think what he was doing was fear mongering. It was just illustrating.
At all.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. I was going to say, Red Venture, I think what you're doing, and this is completely left field. I just wanted to say it quickly and perhaps shut the fuck up if no one finds it interesting. Freud, in his book Totem and Taboo, goes through a lengthy explanation of how he thinks that being part of a society is in and of itself traumatic and leaves us with a constant sense of anxiety. So as a civilization, what we've learned to do is to direct all this anxiety into what he calls taboos. And throughout the book, he goes through everything from, Viennese culture in Europe all the way through to Zulu culture in South Africa. And I think that if you could discuss this problem in a paradigm like this in a modern setting, it would be this whole fear of being labeled something phobic. Like, you're literally trying to read into other people's comments and get an insight onto whether they're a bad person or not, because you have this constant fear that something could break what is fundamentally an irrational fear. I mean, yeah, like it was said, Nicholas said, you can say something transphobic on accident or out of ignorance, but not be a transphobe. You can say something racist in a heat of the moment argument, but not necessarily hold those values. The idea that we can judge the content of one's character on one misspeaking or perhaps one part of their experience that they're ignorant on is fundamentally irrational. And I think that really could just argue a case that the modern taboo is living in constant fear of saying something that's potentially could be misconstrued as sexist or transphobic or misogynistic or insert fucking buzzword here.
No, I agree with that, because what's happening is people. For example, two things. One, like when the ADA denounced Rationality Rules, that sends a chilling message to anybody who ever wants to talk about these topics. That's the goal. The goal. I honestly believe this, and I've talked to some people that the goal is so much just to censure him. Okay, it's not to have a declaration of heresy against the orthodoxy or the proclamation of that he did something that they don't agree with. It wasn't so much that to alienate him or to extricate him from the ADA. It was to tell people in the future, don't make shit about this video. Don't make stuff about this topic. Don't discuss transgender issues unless we approve of what your message is. That is what they were saying. The entire proclamation was for that goal, and that goal pretty much only. The second thing is there's certain types of things that now might be construed as racist to certain people that have not been before, like the word Oriental, right? Oriental used to apply to anybody that was from the Orient, including Asian people. Over a period of time, that term has more gone into being to objects, right? And some Asians don't like to be considered to be like an object, right? I get that, right? So they prefer the term Asian instead. Asian, not a big deal, right? So you call an Asian person Asian, you call an object from the Orient, Oriental object, fine. But that's not how it was for a very, very long time. And still people may not even be in that system, right? They may not, know even about that. And there's still a lot of Asians who don't give a shit either way. So if you say the word Oriental to somebody, you don't know if they're going to take offense or not. They may or not. It's up to them if they take umbrage. What I see a lot is that third parties not even involved are white knighting on behalf of the groups that they're not even involved with.
That's one of the things that I discussed earlier too, which is especially when some of this happens on Twitter, a lot of people tag in their friends, and all of a sudden people who have actually really nothing to do with that topic, but they enjoy getting into an argument. And there are some people who I've just seen in every single argument, they will argue whatever side, especially if they have a friend, and they can get tagged into it. And it's like, first of all, when they get tagged in, the only reason they're coming in is because their friend said so, and they're following their friend's assessment of what's going on. They don't read the tweets, they don't catch up with it, and so all of a sudden and then first of all, they start shit hammering you and attack everything you say and do. Then they're going and telling everybody else, hey, guess who's being sexist and racist, and I've got tweets of it. The only problem is they haven't even looked at it. They're going, it's now becoming hearsay on hearsay upon hearsay. And it's insane, and then that just sticks with you forever. And it's like, could somebody actually read this? And by the way, and this gets into what we had talked about, the principle of charity, which if you take a look at the video and you say, okay, I have concerns about this, but apply the greatest possible charity to it, especially if he's from the same tribe, although I think really you do it to everybody, that would have helped in Steve's case, my case, the Rationality Rules case, and again, where he's trying to address it, but instead it's this, what can we do to make him look like a bad person? And it's not everybody who's doing that, and it's not, and there are some people who aren't doing that, but that sort of is where it goes quickly.
Well, here's also another part where the ACA kind of royally screwed the pooch on this one, where they were actually going so far with trying to give him no charity whatsoever as to actually go and put words in the dude's mouth.
Oh, yes, they did. I forgot about that. I forgot about that. That strikes me as irrefutable. I may be wrong. Maybe they have evidence. That strikes me as irrefutable.
When you have a board member, and when a board member speaks on behalf of the organization, whether they like it or not, they're part of the PR persons. Claire from the board, she actually said, and she's on I forget the name of the podcast that they do, but she actually said that Rationality Rules came out and actually said that he was transphobic. Now,
she said something rough. I forget what it was, but she said something that wasn't true. I could look it up.
She said that he had said that he was transphobic. Her words.
Yeah.
I just, with regard to the way these, like you were saying before, these people dogpile onto someone that they consider suddenly an enemy. Is it about the power? Is it about saying I'm better than you and I'm denouncing you?
No, it is that you need to talk about what we want to talk about, and anything you say that's in disagreement when it comes to these types of issues, we are going to extricate you from the tribe.
Well, that's one of the things. That's actually what we talked about right at the beginning, which is that I think hatred is fun. It's really fun to have righteous indignation towards other people. It is cathartic. It necessarily elevates you over whoever you hate. That's why I said in the beginning, and again, out of context, I'm going to be in big trouble with this. It must be fun to be in the KKK because you do nothing but sit around and say.
A quote for you. Well, there goes this video. It's going to take it down.
Welcome to demonetization.
The views of the co-host on this channel is not necessarily that of the channel owner.
Well,
that's That's my newest meme.
No.
I'm gonna make a meme out of that.
Well, and I mean, sit there and call yourself so much better.
That's a great set of quote.
Keep in mind, I said it must be. I'm going to be in so much trouble with that. I can't believe it. I doubled down on it now because I've said it 3 times actually in the same.
Keep digging.
Oh God!
Quick, cut. Yeah, Chestnut was like,
yeah, wait.
Stop
Can we cut the feed? Can we cut the feed?
Go to black.
Go to black.
Yeah. So
what was it? Was it CNN or Fox that said, "Get off it, get off it, get off it, get off it"?
Well, I think I made the point. I'd said it enough times already that I could be crucified for it.
I know you got. I know we got to end this, Nick. But
yeah, we do. I'm right. Yeah,
I want to real quick. I'm very proud that there are certain people that have stood up. Matt Dillahunty has extricated himself from it. He has stood by Rationality Rules. Cosmic Skeptic has stood up. He has stood by Rationality Rules. I feel for Jamie and Eric. I really do. I like Talk Heathen. I think that's a great show. I actually watch it more than the Atheist Experience. They're not in a position of anybody that you would want to be in. Right? They're literally in between a rock and a hard place. They have to deal with their share. They're not their shareholders, but their
bosses,
board of directors.
The board. Yeah, the board. They have to deal with their board and the talent and the audience. And I reached out to Jamie. I consider him a friend, and Eric as friends. And I gave him my moral support and said, look, I don't even know what your position is on this stuff, but I can tell you look distraught, dude. And I just wanted to let you know I have no personal egregious against him whatsoever. I think he's doing the best he can. And I'm not going to throw anybody under the bus under this unless they absolutely go out and sit there and try to run this narrative that a friend of mine like Rationality Rules, who I have utmost respect for, is something that he's not. Because I think all of us can put ourselves in that position. And many of us have been in that position. So we can empathize with that. But I don't want anybody to throw Jamie or Eric or them under the bus, because believe me, it's not easy for them either.
Yeah.
They're nice people. Jamie is he's got a heart of gold, man.
There really is a difference between the talent, the board, also even the PI. I mean, it's a mess up, but everybody's got a master over there, and sometimes they have to. So it's tough. But I think what I'm probably going to do is I'm probably going to leave it at that, and we're gonna wrap this up. I guess if people want to stay, that's up to Steve if he's going to continue it or what he's going to do.
No, we got to go.
All right, so good, because I'm sort of at the end of mine too. So thank you all for coming. I think it was a spectacular discussion. I really appreciate everybody that contributed to the demonetization of Steve's channel. And,
well, my channel will be here tomorrow.
So I'm just trying to get rid of the competition. He's right. It just came out.
Right.
So.
Alternative motives.
All right. So thank you guys very much. Thank you, Steve, for letting me run the ship for a little bit. And thank you all. And look forward to anyone who hasn't subscribed. I think we got the super chats. So thank you all very much. And I will see you all later. Good night.